All right. We'll probably have to trim this down later, I suppose. Hey, Dylan.
What's up?
Hey, Ophir. Is there a link we can send this out to the rest of the chat? Oh, we sent it to that, I guess, but
Probably like bump out an email since we're using a new link.
All right.
yes. Do we have let me get the link for this. Settings, control room, add apps. There we go, links. Links. So this is the YouTube page. So I got the YouTube page linked. Darn, do we have a link to this broadcast though?
Presumably, like, exists a link so people can watch it live if they're so inclined.
Yeah, I found that.
And then it presumably keeps after
All right, yeah, I'll post the link on Facebook or something like once like everyone's actually once a couple more folks are actually here. Although you have kind of a quorum right now, I guess.
Cool, yeah. I'm assuming we're waiting on Itamar and Mr. Anshi.
Yes.
Yeah, Ryan. Yeah. So basically, since you changed the link there, they all are asking me for the link. So I just sent Ryan Bilcher the link because he was going to be in this.
Was it an Oh, that's great. Did you send it by email, or would you be able to send it to Eric? Okay.
Yeah. I just did.
Did you reply all or just to him?
Oh no, I not through email. I sent it to them through Discord because they're both on at the moment.
Oh, okay. You sent it to Eric as well, I take it then?
Yeah. To both of them.
Okay.
And is my mic picking up a lot of noise? One of my housemates is playing piano, and I can probably tell it to stop if you guys are hearing it.
Your mic is fine. I have no issue with that. Oh, there's Eric. Okay. Oh, hey, look, there are two Washington crossing the Delaware pictures. It's a great broadcast.
You're a man of good taste.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, can someone send that link to Itamar on Discord? I'll tell Itamar on Facebook that the link is on Discord, which is a really not logical way to do this, but I stupidly did not paste the link into a Word document somewhere.
Eric, I think you're muted. Oh, you're not.
Okay.
Now I can hear you. I can hear you now.
Yeah, I can hear Eric.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Itamar
is on Facebook. So I have messaged him. So
wait, who are we trying to find?
Itamar. Ryan is. You said Ryan's joining soon, right? Oh, we do have Ryan. Oh, excellent.
He's muted.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Cool. All right. Well, we got a lot of people now, so I will post. Yeah, I'll post this real quick, and then we can get started. I have a brief opening statement. The general plan will probably be I have a brief opening statement, go around the table, and then we'll just dive right into things. Hope to be as time efficient as possible. I'll try to do a screen. I'll do a screen share probably, where I'll flip between the packet and Ryan's app.
That's nice. That way I don't have to do that myself. I also have the toss-ups portion of the Ophir spreadsheets up, just so I can get like a good glimpse of first positives, who got them, where they were, conversion percentage, that kind of stuff.
ACF regional, ACF regionals. Post meeting. All right, so that's up.
1 second, I'll be back in a moment.
No worries.
All right, I'm back. I should be slightly.
Oh, Ophir, you have a display as well?
Let's see if I can force Ophir's screen to. Oh, hey, there we go.
Oh, wow,
just click it. Just click on his John at the bottom.
This is really nice.
You said John. Anyway, the only thing is, I think it doesn't. If you could make it a little bit, the display a little bit smaller, because just the stuff that appears on the edge of the Hangouts interface sometimes. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, that looks good. Did I get this question?
Right.
Oh God, no. Oh God,
I believe
no.
you can also kill the chat on the side.
My one of my teammates got this, but like.
Yeah.
This is one of the packets of this set that I've read, and I am heroically negging with the Marriage of Figaro.
Yeah,
I think a number of people did that.
I think Penn played this pack. I want to say Penn played this packet. I think.
No, this was the packet you watched us lose to Hopkins B on.
Okay.
Okay. Well, I guess we're doing this anyway.
All right. So the packets I wanted to
cover.
cover. Okay. So the packets, I believe I mentioned this earlier in the email, but the packets I wanted to cover today were one, packet A, which should be Waterloo et al. And that one was played at almost every site, to my understanding. The other one I wanted to cover was perhaps somewhat counterintuitively, I guess.
I believe the UCSC UF JHU packet.
And that's BHU teams that had their packet used. So to anyone who says the D team packet won't get used, is not true. But in any case, yeah, no. So and the one reason I wanted to use that one, as Ryan pointed out in an email, is that actually that was not used at the Penn State site, and there's a lot of, not exclusively, but there's several people from the Penn State site here, and hopefully Itamar will be able to join the call, because then he might have played that packet. But I think it'd be a useful exercise to take a packet where we do still have a reasonable amount of buzz data, but at the same time, maybe you guys didn't play it, so we can have some maybe fresher perspectives on predictions. I don't know. Anyways, that was my thought. Okay.
And so I did not play the set, but I am completely blind on the second packet we're going over and have read through the first packet pretty extensively.
Oh, so, perfect. Oh, yeah. So this exercise should work perfectly then. All right.
I'm not sure whether I've played either of these, but either way.
You definitely played the first one.
Okay.
The first one was the first packet at almost every site, to my understanding.
Oh, okay. So it was the one that like we were still getting our bearings on. Okay.
Yes.
The tournament opened with the toss-up on Morgana.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Got it.
All right.
Yeah.
Or the Hussars.
All right. So without further ado, yeah, I guess I'll give it an opening statement or something if we need to record this. All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to this close reading of 2018 ACF Regionals. Here with me today are, in no particular order, Itamar Nave Benjamin, who will hopefully show up shortly, Sebastian Leduca, Ryan Bilger, Dylan Mitterick, Jason Chang, Wang Anxi, and special guest stat wizard Ophir Lifshitz. In this session, we're hoping to dive deep on a couple packets of toss-ups from this year's regionals and hear thoughts from our wide range of community members about them, while engaging with advanced stats that Ophir has created to enable us to test hypotheses and critically engage with questions. In case you didn't know, I guess, I was one of the I had the privilege of being one of the editors of this year's regionals under Aroni. Specifically, I did all history except for post-1600 CE continental Europe, myth, religion, and auditory arts. I'll speak more about my specific writing and editing approach as we dissect the questions, but for the most part, I'd like to let the players talk about them and voice their perspectives. Before I say anything more, though, I'd like to thank Aroni for inviting me to edit regionals, while my co-editors for providing a ton of useful feedback, as well as a bunch of play testers, including Mr. Minerick, who is in this chat, and Ophir for proofreading and providing us with the stats. A purpose I'd like to emphasize during this discussion is our goal of including a wide range of voices, not just be inclusive, but representative as possible within a limited time frame about the diverse range of experiences of ACF regionals players with a wide range of specialties. From here, I'll just hand it over to our panel members to introduce themselves real quick. So I guess we could start with you, Dylan, I guess, and just go down the line.
Oh no! Hi everybody, I'm Dylan Minerick. I played Quiz Bowl for 4 years at Northwestern. I am no longer eligible, so I did not play this tournament or staff any of the sites. So I am going into this with a somewhat unique perspective. I am 100% clean on the second packet that we're going to be looking over. I did do some play testing for this set though, and I guess what I'm going to sort of do is look over these questions from a generalist's perspective, because sort of my way of studying Quiz Bowl and going after questions as a player was to be contesting a certain amount of questions every round. I sort of, because you only have to get 11 questions and convert a certain number of bonus parts to be competitive against most teams. And anything else? Sorry, that was kind of word salady.
No, nothing in particular. Just as a best practice, if we're all not speaking, just please go on mute while we're doing that. Thanks.
I may disappear periodically when science questions are being discussed. I don't
No worries, man. No worries, man. All right. Let's move down the line. Eric.
Hi, I'm Eric. I play for Penn. We did play ACF regionals at Penn State. It was a site that we won. I'm really fortunate to have played with Jamie Carlson, Gina Kim, and Paul Lee. Jamie in particular is quite good at literature, so I got to sort of see that perspective and like where she was buzzing. She's also very much a real knowledge sort of player, so I get that sort of perspective. I will probably be commenting mainly on science, as I don't think my commentary elsewhere will be super valuable. I'll also be commenting sort of from the perspective of somebody who has written a lot of questions and sort of has his own process for writing as like an outside writer. One of the things just perusing the Ophir stats from this regional that sort of stood out to me is that the buzzes sort of in aggregate were later than they needed to be. And I'll hopefully we'll be able to talk about some examples of that and maybe ways that writers and editors can try to get a sort of more, not necessarily like uniform distribution of buzzes across the question, but more early buzzes in the question that's while still managing to distinguish players of different ability. Because that's something that is important to me as a writer. I imagine is important to everybody. So,
all right, thanks, Eric. Jason, why don't you go ahead and speak?
All right. Hi everyone, I'm Jason Chang. I've played for UCSD. I did play this year's ACF regionals with the UCSD team, and on the whole, I'd say I probably write and edit questions more than I'd actually study. My collegiate playing experience is mostly in the Southern California region, where it's not the strongest of all regions. So I guess what I can bring to this conversation, or what I'm trying to bring to this conversation, is sort of a idea of how like these types of clues, especially at this regionals, where a lot of people pointed out that the earlier clues were a lot harder to buzz on, how these types of clues might play out for a weaker audience. Although, I believe according to stats, this year's UCSD regional site was one of the stronger ones, weirdly enough. And that's about all I have to say, I think.
All right. Sebastian, why don't you go ahead?
All right. Hi, I'm Sebastian. I play for Carnegie Mellon. I'm a freshman, and I played in high school, but I'm in this conversation going to be bringing the perspective of somebody who is new to collegiate quiz bowl and played ACF regionals as my second collegiate tournament, and was completely just I'm completely and totally overwhelmed by the questions themselves. So that's coming from a standpoint of spending a whole week at a hackathon and then coming to that site and being exhausted. So that's kind of what a lot of the perspective I'm going to be bringing to this, just from somebody who's really overwhelmed and not sure if they want to continue.
Thanks, Sebastian. And Ryan, why don't you go ahead?
Okay, hi. I'm Ryan. I am a junior at Gettysburg. And so, yeah, I played this tournament at the Penn State site. I guess I'm an arts player because I somehow accidented my way into getting the most art points at this tournament. But I am also the kind of player who has to pay attention to pretty much every toss-up because I get like 15 PPG and teammate support combined. So when questions are too long or lead-ins are too much, if I'm the kind of person who's really going to get worn down by that. And so I think that is something to look at here, and I'm glad we're doing this. And at risk of ranting, I think that's pretty much what you need to know about me. So.
Thanks, Ryan. Ophir, do you have any remarks? Ophir, do you have any remarks?
He does not have a microphone, according to the chat.
Okay, sounds good. All right then. So why don't we hop into this? If you don't mind, Ophir, can you start with the toss-up on toss-up 1 from packet A on Morgan Le Fay? Sure, no problem.
I do have thoughts on that one.
All in all, just like looking at this packet from top to bottom, I thought that it was fairly on the tame side with a few toss-ups that I take a bit of issue to, but generally the conversion on this packet was not bad.
We're going to be talking about that Morgan Le Fay toss-up. I thought it was not a bad idea. Like, you know, it's definitely not going to be, certainly not going to be one of the more wild answer lines that I guess weaker players in the tournament wouldn't be able to convert.
All right,
I thought it was great when I played it.
All right, so yeah, here it is, and it did get it did get slightly edited after the main event, but I don't think that should affect things too much. So yeah, so there's the toss-up right there. So if folks want to give any comments that they have on it, please feel free to go ahead.
I'm like that they found a lot of fresh clues for Arthurian myth, which I think that, especially at higher difficulties, is a category that's a bit mined to death. I think that's probably a good reason why this toss-up was, I think, not buzzed early at all. The first buzz was at 58%, so nobody buzzed in the first half of this toss-up. That's a bit concerning, but I do like that the clues were rather fresh and seem important, but I think this toss-up was perhaps a bit more unforgiving for introductory players who aren't sort of familiar with all of the aspects of Arthurian myth that have been asked to death in College Quiz Bowl.
I mean, I'd like to point out that the original toss-up Texas CEO of yours brought it up. Because the Marion Zimmer Bradley book, Myths of Avalon, which is I really like that was asked because it's probably one of the two biggest contemporary sources of how we imagine Arthurian myth, along with T.H. White's Once a Future King. But the original clue on that, though, I'd like to point out is was a little unfortunate in that when I played this round, it was both me and on Berkeley, Justin Yim. who went to the same high school as me, and we both read The Mist of Avalon. And this is the type of clue that I think led to a lot of misleading buzzes, or at least a lot of misdirection. Wherein the original clue said something along the lines of Marion Zimmer Bradley book reimagined this figure, as gave rise to the modern reimagining of this figure, which wasn't the most clear of clues, since in the whole thing about Mist of Avalon is that it's a feminist, it's retelling of the Arthurian myth. So every story that Marion Zimmer Bradley could think of retold from the perspective of a female character. So at that point, while I was sure that both me and Justin on Berkeley knew what this clue was, it's very hard to buzz on these types of clues, where more or less we buzz in. I for one negged with Merlin. So I think it was good that I guess we'll change that clue and at some point before uploading these packets.
Yeah, I think I noted that issue too when reading this question. The other thing is that I'm not surprised the buzzes were late, because it seems like the first sentence of this question, especially, if you sort of seen a bibliography of Arthurian myths, you'll recognize Eric and Enid, so immediately this is some Arthurian thing, and they keep saying this character, so it's probably a woman, and then she's clearly this person is clearly doing villainous stuff, right? Oh, so the first buzz was 56 words in, not 56%. So that
just to confirm over here, is that first correct buzz, or do we have
the negs
minus, or the minuses?
We have 4 negs before the correct buzz.
Yeah. And it looks like Jamie from Penn, Annabelle from Duke, and Laurel from Ohio State all were the first 3 to get it correct.
And
Jason negged it. So okay. So they're buzzing on
Isle of Apples in the middle of that quote.
Okay. Okay. So I mean, they're buzzing on a thing that is a reified detail about Morgan Le Fay, which I guess is good. I feel like the clues before that were a little vague and a little bit not memorable. I don't is the role of Morgan Le Fay and Eric and Enid is that a big part of that story? Because I don't know.
No, it's pretty much just I mean, I wrote, so I'll come out straight out and say I wrote this as an editor question because we got no real usable submissions on Arthurian myth, and so I needed to put what I felt we needed to have some representation for that.
Yep.
And so I thought, well, this is a I don't know, it's if this ends up being packet 1, which it was going to be, I was this is a perfectly fine answer to have in a first packet. It's somebody that people have heard of, and so my ability, I will come out and straight up say I don't actually know that I taught about Arthurian myth necessarily, so my ability to calibrate lead-ins and early clues isn't necessarily the greatest here. So pretty much I sort of just browse a list of major texts, picked out some clues that I thought would grade 8 teams reasonably well, and I really did want to use Mists of Avalon because that sort of seemed like the thing that, just based on my judgment, as Jason said, Quizbowl may not necessarily have touched on very much, but is pretty much a very key source to our modern conception of Arthurian myth. Because really, before that book really was a thing, Morgan was basically always seen as a villainous sorceress, like a bad person. Right. Now, there's a much more benign version of her, which is probably helped by the whole Magic Treehouse series, I would imagine. But but yeah, no. So I don't want to say too much mea culpa, but that's sort of what the thought process went into. The thought process that went into constructing this question was, so I thought that was. Perhaps I should have put that earlier.
I think it's a good impulse. I think what you could have done is shave down the top line a little bit, just because it's obscure clues about an already obscure thing, and talk more about sort of the unique things about her in the Mists of Avalon at the beginning. Yeah. I think that would have made it more buzzable. So this is so Ryan was kind enough to put this term that I coined randomly in a post that he made on the regionals forum, but I'll repeat it here, is that I want to sort of bring up this concept during editing called fanning, where you take a middle clue or a late clue and take out you write more about that middle clue or that late clue to pad the earlier parts of the question, because people will probably have more depth of knowledge about the middle clues than they do about like the random obscure lead-ins that you find. And this would be an example of that. So like Jason has told us that him and another player have both read the Mists of Avalon, but their Mists of Avalon knowledge is not being rewarded because there's just so little about the Mists of Avalon in this question that you're not going to get enough meat for somebody to like latch onto. Right. So like if you can sort of expand that out, you will reward people who have read the Mists of Avalon before the ones that don't. Like, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense.
Okay.
Yep.
Does anybody else have anything to? Sorry, I cut you off. Go ahead.
No, that's fine. I think that's just a good idea in general for this question, because say we're getting a few of those people who have read Mists of Avalon to actually buzz in on this question, because there's a lot of early nags. And I think that if done correctly, you could stretch this buzz curve out a little bit more.
Yeah, I think if I were to make a change, assuming we are trying to get to the 7-line thing, this toss-ups is 7.5 lines, so I'd probably just like cut this long first sentence, put in a short Mists of Avalon first clue, and I think the rest is mostly fine. Not to just because like that Valley of Stones clue, perhaps maybe it's not as memorable. It's definitely unique. It's definitely in. I can't remember off the top of my head where I got it, but it's definitely like a key plot point in like some major Arthurian texts. Maybe that could be the first clue, however you choose to order that.
So, not on Sussman, but in general, I think what Eric pointed out was a pretty big theme for this tournament. I think a lot of the perceptions of like why this tournament was so hard or how it ended up so hard is that like the first 3 sentences could usually be a perfectly fine lead-in or a perfectly fine set of first 2 clues. So in effect, we were playing like for this toss-up, like 3 sentences of lead-ins before we got to like clues that started really players started like really keying in on, which played out for questions such as this.
Possibly. All right. Do we want to let's look at this? Let's look at toss-up number 2 now. Let's answer toss-up on ships. So anyone who feel free to take the floor on this.
So I don't, Ophir hasn't pulled up the data yet, but I imagine there's probably a pretty big cluster of buzzes around the Mary Rose clue in this toss-up.
Yeah, I'd probably agree with that. It's definitely where
what's in the Mary Rose Museum?
The Mary Rose, it's like a ship from the time of Henry VIII that I think is one of the more famous English shipwrecks.
Got it. I remember getting this on the Vasa Dynasty thing because like the Vasa is like a notable shipwreck, but I don't really know like where people's knowledge of this kind of thing comes from. So it's hard for me to know how to write this question well.
I do think this question's pretty good. Just I think that this lead-in, I think that all of the clues are pretty buzzable. If I remember correctly, Jacob Myers got a very fast early buzz on this. The first buzz is at 22%, so certainly people knew the early clues.
Yeah, also, like, this compared to the previous toss-up, like, the earlier clues are a lot more definitive. Whereas, like they're very, very, like, if you heard it, you would know what it's pointing to if you actually knew what they were talking about. Where the last one, it was just like the clues themselves are written in a manner that they're kind of vague or convoluted that doesn't necessarily point you to any specific piece of memory should you have actually had it.
Ryan, not to call you out too much, but I know you got a good buzz on this one. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so this is actually a perfect example of a real knowledge buzz because I buzz right around not too long after Barry Clifford because I go to Cape Cod every year. I've been to the Witta Museum in Provincetown. I read Barry Clifford's book about finding the thing like a decade ago, but I still remember his name. And my mom sent me an article like a couple months ago that he found something else. So I'm like, that name came up in the toss-up, and I'm like, oh my God, is this the guy from the Widow? So that's why I buzzed on that. I agree that I think this one has better and sort of very concrete clues that obviously I guess people don't know those early ancient things, but they seem like things that would be potentially important in this sort of field. I mean, I can't entirely speak to that, but that's why I got it where I did, just happenstance.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that too. I guess what I previously said about like it seemed like a lot of these toss-ups had 3 sentences of lead-ins was I think some of that perception also came from the fact that some of the earlier sentences wouldn't be very concrete either. Whereas I guess for this toss-up, I think each one of these sentences, these clues, like completely nail down like exactly what you'll be looking for if you were to know it and were trying to come up with an answer.
Pretty big spike of buzzing at 60%.
Yeah, I can talk very briefly before we move on about my thought process in writing this. So basically, with a very slight alteration, the entire last half of this toss-up was kept from a submission. The first half of the original submission was unfortunately a lot of clues that had been pretty overused in past questions. Like the first clue in the submission, for example, was on the Nemi ships, and I'm pretty sure that's been a lead-in like 3 or 4 times before. And so, like, well, I mean, doesn't necessarily make it a bad clue. Perhaps like a few years down the line, it just felt like that would play out non-ideally, and so I decided to replace those with perhaps some things that may be a bit more obscure, or depending on your perspective, a bit more fresh, and which I had previously encountered in my readings about our shipwreck archaeology. And the Widow, for example, that's another one. I'm very pleased you buzz on that. That came right out of a class I took on pirate history, of all things. All right.
Always here for Black Sand Bellamy clues. Always here for Black Sand Bellamy clues.
It's awesome. All right. Toss up number 3 here on herpes.
Go to town, Eric.
I actually really like this question. I don't see much too wrong with it, other than the only minor complaint I had is that the stuff about like glycoproteins B and C, like they apply to all of the viruses in the herpes family and not just HSV1 or not just HSV2. Otherwise, like I think the distribution of buzzes across this one is really good. I mean, a lot of people buzzed on. So I was playing with Paul and I was trying to like just see where he knew things. So like I went into Whitlow to buzz, and that's fine. And I think a lot of people got it there, so that's fine. Yeah, I don't really see much wrong with this question, honestly. Can we see the distribution of buzzes just so I'm not like misremembering anything? Yeah. So let's see. Oh, we got some negs in the beginning. Where did I get it? Oh, there I am. Okay. Looks like Bill Sussman from Brandeis has the first buzz, which was on. What was it on? Let's see. On thumbs. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. The issue here is that so if nobody's buzzing on the first half of this question, which seems to be a recurring theme, I guess like it part of it depends on sort of how you learn about herpes, like other than I guess personal experience, but like a lot of the stuff in the first half you don't learn like in medicine. You learn if you happen to study herpes in like a basic science class, and like I don't think a lot of people have that experience. I think there's definitely ways to. I think there's ways to put more buzzable clues at the beginning of this question. It feels like a lot of the early stuff is kind of flat. I mean, they're fine clues. It's just they're not like really distinguishing anything until it gets to Whitlow, where apparently I'm buzzer racing Chris Ray, which is always a unsettling experience.
What are you doing, man?
I know, right? What am I doing? So yeah, I mean, I think if I were writing this question, I would, what would I do? I'd probably like cut down a little bit on the clues about the genome, because it's one of those things that like either you learn about the genome of this thing or you learn about how to treat it, and you don't often learn a lot about both. So like I put a little bit more about like acyclovir or something, like stuff like that at the beginning. Maybe that would help conversion. I don't know, but yeah, it just seems like the entire complex of clues at the beginning is like if you stared at the genome of herpes virus once, like you will get a buzz at the beginning, or if you haven't, then you're just waiting until like afterwards. It doesn't seem like there's much of a pyramid. So yeah, that's my take on that.
Yeah, I guess you wonder if like if this first sentence were just cut and the rest of the toss-up were kept as is. I feel like it would like mostly be fine, probably.
Yeah,
I mean, like it. Yeah.
No, it's true. And honestly, it's hard to tell from an editor's perspective, like really what people know about this. Because it's not one of those things that like you take a biology class and like you take a biology class or a cell bio class or an immunology class and like everybody, no, not everybody talks about herpes in class, right? Besides sex ed, obviously, but like that's not gonna help you here. So it's not something that lends itself necessarily to a very neat ordered sort of pyramid. But I think in general what I would have done is sort of expanded out the middle clues a little bit more and cut off a little bit more of the beginning. Just especially like the sentence about like attaching to heparin sulfate is fine, but then all the glycoproteins are kind of unnecessary.
I have a question actually, Eric.
Yeah, what's up?
Your thoughts.
Yeah.
You can see, say you were buzzing using CRISPR, and apparently my teammate Jonathan was buzzing right at that point too. But when I asked him about it later, he said he didn't actually know if it was herpes concretely. He just said because of the previous clues, it just sounded like herpes, which is why he buzzed. And I'm just wondering what you think of that. Like what.
Yeah, I mean, as an editor, that's something you always worry about. Like, if I didn't know what a whitlow was, and I just heard about like a virus that was causing lesions on your fingers and your thumb, like that kind of just if I can sort of take out the background knowledge, yeah, that just like outright sounds like herpes. I think there was a question. I think it was at this tournament where like literally there's a question on like Japan and literature, and they said like an autistic teenager wrote a book or something, and like. I totally get-eared that question because I thought that was talking about Hikari Oe, right? But it wasn't. It was talking about some other autistic Japanese teenager. But I still got points. Yeah. And that's totally a thing that happens. And I would honestly, if I were writing that question, I would say it would cause like characteristic whitlow lesions and not like say what they are, because the term whitlow is unique to herpes, but like skin lesions kind of point you in a certain direction, right? So
yeah. All right.
I think that's the point. That's like a point in the toss-up where if you're making that calculated risk, you kind of know what you're getting into.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Sounds right. Just noticing our time. We did the first 3 toss-ups presumably in about 20 minutes. So presumably now that we've got out a lot of our initial thoughts and theories, we can go at a faster pace. We just want to keep that on all of our minds as we move on.
Yeah, man. Startup costs.
For sure. All right, so here we have probably the fourth relatively easy answer in a row, but this, in terms of how it played out, maybe not so easy. So I guess we can let some of the lit players speak more to this initially.
I predict, like as you saw like some of the previous toss-ups, like more of a later distribution on this. It seems like I guess Aroni went kind of wild with the first 2 sentences.
This actually, so just for some context, so Aroni was the editor for the long fiction and poetry questions, and Will Hollow-Mormon did the short fiction, drama, and miscellaneous lit toss-ups. So this was an edit, but this is from Will.
So I guess it would be a little. No, that's my bad. Sorry, Aroni. I don't know. Like I guess it's easy to justify like a toss-up on Borges where like the early clues are like as specific as this. Like personally, I don't read that much Borges, but I know like I think people in Quizbook read like Infinite Stories by Borges. So I guess it's like a weird like in between. Not sure what to do with this. But But yeah, I would predict a like later distribution of buzzes just because it seems the first couple sentences just seem like a little kind of like mining the lower tier like Borges works.
Yeah, I think this toss-up feels a bit top-heavy. I know that Quizbull loves Borges, but I feel like this could afford to have a few more middle clues. It looks like it got some decent middle buzzes, but then not a lot until like the 75% mark.
Yeah, not until like the Aleph stuff.
Which is where I sort of predicted the toss-up would cliff, because you're going straight from clues from this story that I assume is on exactitude in science, but I'm not certain, to just a character from the Aleph.
Yeah, I guess at this maybe another instance of this first sentence could probably have gone. The second sentence seems like it probably would have been a fine lead-in, and then just maybe like flesh out the Aleph description a bit more or something.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Like, instead of mentioning more like obscure things or like expanding the canon more, like another thing that you could do is to people who have dedicated more times to reading Borges' work, you maybe could like push earlier clues that clue things that late clues clue, but in a sense where it's like a more obscure thing that's mentioned in that work instead of cluing a more obscure work altogether.
Yeah,
Yeah, it feels like you could have read like a lot of the Borges core and still not get a particularly great buzz on this question.
Yeah, like, I agree with
there's just so many. Like maybe the first, or maybe even like the first two clues could be like lower tier works, but then like let's say like maybe like take two of his bigger works and then say like go deep on one and deep on the other, then easy on the other, easier on the other, and then
I agree with the
I'm with Sebastian. Just for my clarification, like these early buzzes on this question, are these clues about obscure Borges works, or are they like deep clues about better known Borges works?
Okay, so I can speak.
They're all about Amazon.
The second. I have no idea about the first clue, but the second clue is a pretty basic plot description of Amazons.
Of Amazon,
yeah, so
okay.
The first one's also Amazons, I think. But yeah, like I said, I agree with the general vision of like maybe having like a obscure Borges work as like your early clue, just because you want to like test like breadth as well as depth. But
Yep.
Seems like here you have like two whole sentences on Amazons. By the time you finish your description of Amazons, you're halfway through the toss-up. Like Suicide of Her Father, that's like about 50% of the toss-up, right? Like or 40%.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yep. All right, let's move on to the next one. All right. So folks who know music, I know Ophir doesn't have a mic. I guess we can mostly get a lot of generalist perspectives. So Dylan, you know some good, a good amount about music too. So why don't you go ahead?
Yeah. So music is probably one of my better categories, just from like being a musician in the past and listening to it a decent amount. I do really like this toss-up. I think that it got a very early buzz on somebody who knows about solo bassoonists, which is very impressive. And the score clue, I think, is extremely evocative as long as you know what a mordant is, which I don't know how much that's asking from non-music specialists, but like they basically are giving you the Rite of Spring bassoon solo right there. And I think that's generally am not the biggest fan of just throwing a bunch of score clues on a page and calling it a toss-up, but I think that this was a very good use of one evocative score clue in a greater toss-up.
Yeah, that was the main change I made to this. It was a very good submission from Yale B, and I cut some clues somewhere, and then I just put it. I'm like, well, let's put a description of the Rite of Spring in there, and it's like that's something I try to do that for pretty much every score clue that I wrote throughout this tournament. And maybe we'll disagree on what the definition of score clues are, but I know Jason, you have a definition you like to use, so why don't you go ahead and say that, and then I can provide some more elaboration.
There's the I was telling Will, there's like the technical definition that like Eddie Kim always complains at me for whenever I say something's a score clue, or it's like literally just something like notes from the score. But then I guess the broader way of like what I usually describe as score clue is like something that requires like a technical like knowledge of music. Like you need to know like the theory, or like you need to be able to like have that like like theoretical knowledge like on the back of your hand, so you can like instantly parse like one of these clues, and that's usually what I refer to as a score clue.
Yeah, that's pretty reasonable. And this toss-up I don't think is particularly heavy on that, honestly. Like there's that one, and I picked that one specifically because I'm like, well, if you have technical music knowledge and you are familiar with this very famous orchestral passage, you will be able to buzz right there. And I was very pleased when I was reading this. It was like, that's exactly what happened. And I asked the player later, I was like, hey, I'm like, yeah, do you play the bassoon? He's like, no, he played like violin or something, I think. I don't remember. But he understood what the words meant, and he liked the rite of spring and was able to buzz off that. So, yeah.
Ophir says, Ophir wrote, this is a fairly standard toss-up, and I expect it to have a smooth distribution except for a gap around Scheherazade and Figaro. If you know those passages, you probably already knew the clues above, so those clues may be worth moving up a line or two.
Yeah, that's not an unreasonable comment. All right, we can move on to number 6 now, I guess. Six looks like it was a toss-up on indices.
All right, let me see what I can say about this.
I'm not really the biggest fan of just the conceit of this toss-up in general, but I don't really have real knowledge of any of the clues until basically the theory clue I had picked up from a textbook, but I don't know if I could have buzzed on it.
Yeah, I mean, I took a class on that, and I guess I'm far removed from it, so like maybe like at one point I knew what the index of a coset was. My main thing was that I buzzed somewhere in the middle of this toss-up and said something like subscript, and like that was a little bit because I think the point I was buzzing is it's the thing in the subscript, right? That when it's like written out. So like that was kind of confusing. But yeah, let me think. So the group theory thing, it's a pretty obscure thing about cosets, I think, like the index of a coset. But tensor, like index gymnastics is like a well-known thing that I've heard used as a term of art. And like tensor contraction is also a term of art, but I'm kind of, it's a little bit concerning to me that sort of this thing goes from like tensor manipulation, like straight to position in an ordered list. Like it feels very cliffy to me, and it feels like there's not a lot of middle ground in this question. I feel like the stuff about like tensor calculus should be sort of in the more in the middle. All right, so let's see. Samir Khan is getting this like halfway. Where's my neck? Yeah, there it is, near the end.
It looks like the first cluster of buzzes is around the group theory clue, presumably people who either study math or are getting that fresh from class right now.
Yeah, which is fine. But I'm just trying to think if I were gonna write a question on index, whether there are any easier clues I could use. And like, oh hey, look, more than one person said subscript. Look at that. Yeah, I'm not a fan of the conceit of this question, and I don't think this question necessarily lends itself to like a smooth pyramid. If I had to have like one criticism of it. So.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that because I remember looking over this toss-up specifically afterward, and like just looking through everything, there's really no middle ground. The other thing is that I feel like between the what number clue is that 1, 2, between the third clue and the fourth clue, it like seems to like got easier than harder again because the Einstein summation convention is like I don't know. To me, it's like feels like it's better known than gymnastics. Like Einstein summation was like a thing that I used as a clue in high school. So like I don't know. That's just the more things. There's definitely like the middle ground is sketchy.
All right. I guess we can move on to number 7 then. Yep.
I like this toss-up.
Yeah,
I
Inmar, Ryan. Oh, sorry, I cut you guys off.
I believe my boy Greg Peterson beat the tournament to this toss-up.
Yeah, and there's yeah, there's a couple, actually 2 pretty good visual arts specialists in this chat. Inmar, I guess, who didn't have a chance to introduce himself earlier, but and Ryan. So if you guys want to speak to this a bit.
Yeah, so I actually thought this was one of the better painting toss-ups in the set in terms of how it's clued. I don't remember exactly where I buzzed, but as soon as they dropped Chelsea, I pretty much knew what was going on. And then going through the rest of these clues, Frederick Leland, that's a name that's always associated with Whistler. Dispute over a painting, I'm pretty sure that's the Ruskin thing, which is, again, clued pretty often. Battersea Bridge, again, that's an important name. The only thing about this question that I had raised to me by people is like making the answer line Nocturnes by Whistler instead of writing it as a toss-up on Whistler and just using the Nocturnes as the clues. And my personal opinion at the time was, I think this is okay because, even in pretty much every Whistler toss-up, going all the way back down to like high school, you're getting clues that he made Nocturnes. So I don't think it's a huge leap for people to make that, but I can understand why this would be a difficult answer line for people who aren't as familiar with art as I am. But in terms of the cluing, I thought this was one of the best art toss-ups in the set.
What do you think of Ophir's mention of the issue, people having issues with the use of the pronoun series?
Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. It's just I feel like the word series is kind of is thrown around in probably more than it should. Like I feel like unless the paintings were actually in some like arranged in some kind of series, you shouldn't use like the term series. Like when I think of series, I think of like what's like the Marina Medici cycle, right? Like where they're actually like painted as part of a series. Like from what I understand, like Whistler's Nocturnes were sort of they were, well, I mean, according to this question, they were given a collective name not by Whistler, right? Like they were sort of arranged later as a group, and that's always something that's thrown me a little bit when that idea is brought up. Oh wow, got a lot of early buzzes on this one.
Yeah, so I'm going to disagree with that because I just Googled a couple art museum sites and they all call it a series. So, I mean, sometimes there may be some like questionable phrasings, but I would generally trust the description of like the Tate or something, like that these paintings are a series. So.
Yeah, if the scholarship's there to back it up, I'm generally okay with it. Like, again, I can definitely sympathize with why people might not get what's going on, but especially, like, as you just said, if the academic literature sort of backs it up, then I think that's what you should go with.
Yeah, the second one I would have is about the whole answer line issue. Like, as much as it's often better to use a simpler answer line, I do think, and this is something I think Billy Bussey does a lot in science, is that he'll use talk about some very simple, basic things. I think Whistler's Nocturnes, as people mentioned, like this is something that gets asked about at all levels. But changing the answer line to sort of like test people a little bit, like, oh, did you actually go learn about this, or do you just learn Old Battersea Bridge associate with Whistler Buzz? So I think there's some validity to that. All right, so there's toss-up number 8 here. Yeah, I guess while we're on the topic, yeah, I should say that painting/sculpture, current events, and geography and post-600 CE Continental European history were all done by Kenji Shimizu. So yeah, he would have edited this one. So if anyone, go ahead. If anyone wants to comment on this.
I guess the only thing I can think of when I think of this toss-up is, again, my teammate Jonathan buzzing pretty early in the toss-up and then saying just Charlottesville. as I don't know. I guess maybe as like a description of the event. Like when he asked for this event, and he just said this event is Charlottesville. And I believe he was negged at first, and then it got closer to the end. I guess the Berkeley team said, I think you should just give it to them, and that happened. I'm not sure how proper that was, but I don't know. I think I'm curious to hear like what people in here think of like the answer line instructions. I guess. What if someone buzzes on? I think Jonathan buzzed around like Keith Ellison and said Charlottesville.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would have been fine to just accept Charlottesville, honestly. Like, or like Charlottesville protest. Like, basically, I would have just had the word Charlottesville underlined. That's just personally how I would do it.
Yeah, personally, I actually like that. I was trying not to interject too much comments during this discussion in terms of like what do I think about whether toss-up's good or not. But I personally think like this toss-up, perhaps a rare example of maybe these late clues aren't needed as very much. Like for example, I don't think this penultimate sentence about a tiki torch mob really adds anything to this question. Like if you don't know that person was killed in a hit and run, like I think like it's gonna sound like. I just really don't think you don't really need that next sentence because like I predict that this toss-up gets almost all the buzzes at very fine people, and then like there's very little else going on after that unless people negged.
That's true. Just from an editor's perspective though, I feel like the Tiki Torch thing is like a notable like sort of cultural depiction of this thing, and I'm totally fine with it being there, right? Like this is one of the problems with CE is that it's hard to sort of grade. It's hard to sort of grade like knowledge about it, and I think it's fine for it to be a little bit more bottom heavy, like with stuff like including the Robert E. Lee statue and the Tiki Torch and Heather Heyer and very fine people like all in the question. Like that's okay. Like I don't see a problem with that from the perspective of an editor, even if like a lot of people are like just destroying the question before that.
Well, I guess, but like if it's adding an extra line to a toss-up where you don't need it. Like, I think by the same logic that we suggested cutting some of those lead-ins earlier, I think we could just get rid of that second to last sentence, and the question would still do its job, and I think the buzz curve definitely illustrates that. All right, shall we move on to toss-up number 9?
I'm back from my brief absence. I managed to get my Wi-Fi back together.
Nice.
All right.
Just as a platonic ideal, I actually really like this question. I feel like the only comment I think like platonically speaking, like it's got a very obscure thing. Then it's got like the Wachovia tract, which is like a notable thing. It's got the Halifax Resolves, which is if you've read about like the revolution, like a lot about the revolution recently, you'll probably remember the New Bern Tryon Palace, like the whole like Lord Dunmore's episode, like that's
it's a regulator war, not Lord Dunmore.
I always fuck that up. See, that's a problem. Anyway, the whole Regulators War episode, like that's just where it should be because since the Regulator War is such a well-known thing, it's perfect to talk about things about the Regulator War in the middle of a question. And I imagine like a lot of buzzes were on like New Bern and Tryon Palace. Yeah, like I mean, unless the distribution of buzzes tell us otherwise, yeah, I don't really see a problem with this. This is great. There's got some really good early buzzes, got some middle buzzes. Yeah, seems all right.
Yeah, just a personal touch I added to this. Like those early clues are actually like some of the people who are like my dad's ancestors. So that's where I got those from. Yeah. Like it was originally some earlier clues about the submission. The earlier clues were originally like things about the Battle of Alamance, the Regulator Moderator War. And I was like, there's nothing theoretically wrong with that, but I sort of wanted to take this question in a different track. Like you get some middle clues, but I'd rather talk about the settlement of New Bern and then drop in a middle clue about how it's connected to this other thing that has come up in questions that I could expect people to be aware of to improve the buzz curve. But for the early clues, I wanted to ask, take a different angle and talk about some settlement history as opposed to some military history. because I thought there was a pretty good amount of that elsewhere in the tournament.
Yeah, I think you did a good job shifting it towards a more sort of unexplored topic without making it too hard, obviously, as you can tell by this extremely smooth curve, which is, I think, probably the best one we've seen so far.
My only complaint about it is are the Tuscarora really not as well known as details about the Regulator War? Like, maybe that's just like my knowledge speaking, but whatever.
Yeah, you could make arguments either way.
Yeah, that's fair.
You can litigate that on a chat somewhere.
Yep, that's fair.
All right, number 10 here. Jason, I know you buzzed on this toss-up. Why don't you start us off?
Honestly, like I can't say I've actually read a lot of Painter, and the only reason I got my buzz there is because Richard Yu likes saying the phrase "whole hog" a lot. I don't know. I think reading back over it, it's pretty like toss-up, I guess. Although I think it might have fallen prey to the same trap as the Borges toss-up did, where the first couple sentences were on like or deeper parts of more like obscure works, making it feel a little more top-heavy. But at the same time, I think I don't know, like the lead-in does sound like Pinter. I don't know like how much you can trust whenever people say like something like that. It's like that just sounds like Pinter, but I guess that did. But other than that, I don't know if I have many comments on this besides like it seems like it would be top-heavy.
Yeah, I think
I'm a little wrong.
I think a lot of that could probably be similar critique as before. I think one of these two sentences, I take it to they're both referring to ashes. If we're to keep it to the 7-line limit, I think this toss-up would honestly probably do the same job without one of those two. It looks like the first buzzers are pretty late, although
it looks like everyone knows the phrase "whole," or like at least 6 people know the phrase "whole hog."
there's nothing wrong with 6 people buzzing on that third clue, right?
I guess. Maybe just cut down like the length of like the first couple sentences.
Yeah, that's another thing. Like just policing word choice in general. It's something I can always do a better job of for sure. But and it's something that really wording for NAQT makes you think about because of their strict length limits. So I think some of those principles could definitely be applied to MACF writing as well. Number 11. This one's kind of a Quiz Bowl classic topic.
Yeah.
This is
the science player.
Yeah, this is like a popular thing to do now. I don't know. I'm sure. Can we see the distribution? Because like I'm buzzing on Strong Program, but that's just because I keep up on this thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Oh, Clark. Jesus Christ.
No, boundary work is an important. Everything in this toss-up is very important.
Yeah, absolutely.
It just might be too much in the collective unconscious right now. But I see nothing wrong with this question in the abstract.
Nope.
Against a good team who like knows thought stuff, I may consider going in on the clue about doing boundary work just because it sort of like sounds like that's where the toss-up is going, and I know that is a popular topic at a Quiz Bowl at this level. I don't think that's necessarily a slide against the question though.
Yeah, I guess there's not much more else to say. Number 12. Jason, I know there's a recording of this, and it was either you or Justin buzzed on it, so you can talk about it, I guess.
I mean, it was me, but it wasn't particularly good buzz. So instead of talking about that, I'd just say I think this is actually a pretty good toss-up. Maybe so the third sentence on Yeats's poem "The Long-Legged Fly," maybe that could stand to be moved to the second sentence. I don't know, maybe cut down like the frequency, like the sheer number of quotes in the lead-in. Other than that, I mean, I thought that was actually a pretty like good toss-up. definitely going to be converted at the end. I don't know by how many people know that Emily Dickinson wrote a poem about a fly and how many were just buzzing on the word buzz. But
Yeah.
I don't know, I liked it.
Looks like a lot of early negs were depressing the conversion on this one.
Yeah, maybe. How many of them, I'm wondering, are people saying tiger or lamb for William Blake? I guess a lot of people. I guess the neg answers weren't recorded for those negs.
Somebody said B. That's great.
I guess there's not much to say about this one. Maybe
Maybe,
it is a better guiding theme, but it seems like a serviceable question. So
yeah, just as usual, like maybe cut one or two of the like early clues that looks like no one buzzed on, and maybe just. I'm pretty sure like most people who negged early were just saying tiger or lamb when they heard Blake.
all right, so I know some people had some strong opinions about this toss-up. I know Itamar actually had some as well, but he seems to have lost his headset, but he can come back in. But feel free to go ahead of this.
Yeah, my thoughts on this toss-up just in like the broad sense are I just think it's a better idea for like a toss-up largely on moral luck with a few other things. It just feels like this would have been better at Nats to me.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah, it just seems like a weird thing to ask about. Like, not like I never heard. Like, of course, the social science distribution is a lot bigger in this format, but something that's specific, and like who, in a sense, was going to go through and read a ton of works just on the nature of luck. Like, sure, if you're a philo major, there's still like a million things that are like you're expected to remember, and probably not many of them are really that much about luck. Whereas, like, if only it's kind of a thing we just come across because you're studying luck or you want to know how luck works or whatever. But like, it just seems like it's not a kind of knowledge people are going to actively seek.
Yeah, so this is actually Sebastian raises a really interesting point that I kind of want to tease apart a little bit. The issue with the toss on moral luck is that it's one of those things that when laymen think about like important philosophical concepts, right? Like what are the things that people think about? They think about things like free will, the existence of God, whatever, right? Those are like there's like a set number of concepts that come up, and luck, the philosophy of luck and moral luck in particular is not like one of those naturally occurring things. Like it's a thing that was literally like created by Bernard Williams as I think it was like Bernard Williams and like Hillary Putnam and so on. So were like they literally like created it to explain something about the world rather than it being like a sort of reified concept that then later gets analyzed.
Yeah, and specifically, it's that can you assign like fault or blame to somebody when an outcome happens when they didn't have full control over it specifically.
Right.
It's got very little to do with like the actual. Got something to do with the actual concept of luck as chance, but it's kind of off topic. And I think that
Right. So this is why this is a much better idea at something like ACF nationals, especially because it's a thing that quiz bowlers know, because it's like a reified philosophical concept rather than one of those things that lay people think about when they think philosophically. So
this is a thing that quiz bowlers like. I think that it was pretty good clue structuring. I know that I'm pretty sure the clue about Gauguin leaving his family is straight out of Williams's writing on moral luck.
That's correct.
That's correct.
It is.
Yeah. Also, like, just the curve about it, just kind of, and the fact that the very last few words are just talking about things that happen by chance. Okay, that's like by definition what luck is. But if you're going to clue all of that stuff, like, of course, everybody who buzzed in like literally the last word is going to be the fall into the category of people who aren't going to go and read obscure treatises, essays, and books or whatever that all these people have written about the idea of moral luck.
Yeah, like for about 75% of teams, this toss-up probably is kind of To use a dismissive phrasing, quack, 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 quack. What is this thing that happens by chance? It's like, you could pragmatically, like, if I were to keep this toss in regionals, I would just cut out that which refers to thing. I would just say for 10 points, what concept? I would literally say nothing else, because then you're just, you know, I mean, okay, then the conversion probably drops from like 100% to 25, but it's not a buzzer race for 75% of teams. Now, whether this question should be in regionals or not, I think that's been addressed here, but.
And I don't know, like, what do you guys think about? Because you see, like, there's like this long block of negs, right around John Rawls, and I'm pretty sure like everyone negging there is just like justice because of John Rawls. Like, what do you think about like, is that a problem?
Oh yeah,
like,
no. If you say the words John Rawls and you don't accompany it with "it's not justice," like that's not okay.
All right.
That's a thing that it's one of those things that like it's easy to miss, and like it's a really minor thing, but it helps with things like that.
Yeah, you're also like driving very quickly into FTP town, so I think that at that point you're John Rawls, and you're right. You don't really know what else to do.
Yeah, it's for a lot of people who don't know don't know that Quizbo likes talking about moral luck. All you see is this toss up that's probably about to end soon, and they say John Rawls. And, yeah, not great.
All right, next one.
Oh boy.
Science, go.
These are all like super real canonical clue. Like this is very much an L-Tinge classic. Like you learn about canonical transformations in like fairly like first or second year undergrad courses. You learn about the Hamilton-Jacobi equation there as well. The time translation symmetry with Noether's theorem. That's definitely easier than the stuff before it. I actually didn't learn that. I may have known the thing about bound orbits at some point, but it's been a while since I've taken that class. My only complaint is that it clips a little bit between it clips a little bit between the special relativity clue and then it says like Hamiltonian. I feel like there's possibly another clue that could be put in there that makes it like an easier pyramid, but I'm not sure what that would be. I'd have to give that a little bit of thought. Let's see. Yeah, I mean I sat on this for a while, so that's let's see if there's got a good distribution of buzzes. So Eric gets it on probably on like time translation symmetry, so I can't count that quickly.
It's right before that, yeah. So he presumably is buzzing on the bound orbits clue.
Yeah, so that's a real thing. That's fine. I never remember the freaking like canonical transformation like thing, so that's fine. Yeah, I mean it is I think it has a suitable number of buzzes. The fact that they're all kind of at the second half might point to the fact that you learn about canonical transformations and the Hamilton-Jacobi equation like sort of all in the same class and like within usually weeks of one another. And if nobody is either taking that class recently or remembering that class well, it just sort of leads to this. So I might have compressed that down a little, but it would have been hard for me to do that a priori as an editor. So I think it's a pretty reasonable thing, but in retrospect, you could talk about just canonical transformations or dealing with the Hamilton-Jacobi equation, and like either way, it's fine.
Seems reasonable.
Yeah, I don't know. This is the other thing I wanted to just say, because like the whole few first like clues are all talking about the same packet of thing. Just wanted to reiterate on that, because that's just like means that less people are going to buzz unless they're specifically looking into that realm of physics.
Yeah. That's a good way of putting it.
Yeah. So I think like maybe like there's energy physics like all over the place. You could include something about thermo or something else that like maybe somebody who's not a physics major might actually know something about. So we can get to spread the buzzers out a little bit.
Yeah, I think that would be a decent idea for this question in particular. When you do that too much, you sort of risk killing all of the ideas when you have to write like 16 packets of a tournament. But I don't know. I do appreciate the absence of named things that you can just buzz and make a one-to-one correspondence with on this question.
All right, so now we come to that Japan toss-up you were talking about earlier, Eric.
Yeah. I looking at it again, I do agree. I think I got this toss-up. I do agree with Eric that This is a very easy toss-up to, I guess, he called it Getty-ing, where it just sounds like Japan, even if you have no idea what any of those clues are, and you're like, you might even think those clues are about something that it's not about, you're still gonna get it.
Yeah, you can certainly back your way into 10 points on here
Yeah.
if you're thinking in a certain manner.
Yeah. Other than that, I predict like a cluster of buzzes around, Air Chrysalis 1284 stuff. Yeah, I don't know what the buzz distribution of this would look like between people, like you said, backing their way into 10 points versus the fact that it's very quickly turns concrete around Air Chrysalis, and then after that the OA stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, if that toss-up didn't have that issue, speaking as a pretty bad literature player, that thing about David Mitchell is actually he actually did a formative experience in his career was he taught English for a year in Japan. So that is actually if you know a lot about David Mitchell, I do think that clue can definitely reward you.
Yeah, I think the buzz distribution bears that out too. Looks like.
Yeah.
I'm very impressed that 5 people have apparently read Fear and Trembling by Amelie Nothomb.
Yeah, Kai made some quip that he carded that after some nationals last year or whatever. But
God damn it!
Oh, so it's not reading.
I don't know. Moving on, I guess. All right, this toss-up. Does anyone have anything to say about this one?
It's pretty good. I know I played a very similar toss-up to this in one of Bentley's technology tournaments. I don't know. I think that it is the clue about that they're labeled Congreve may be related to the fact that he's probably Christians that light on fire a little bit too early. But other than that, it's a fine toss-up.
Yeah. Yeah, I personally just buzzed in and negged on Congreve a few words before they said rockets. But I thought that was kind of misleading, but yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a good call out. I think that sentence could have been reworded. It's as a tribute to an early inventor of rockets, John Walker sold them in packages called Congreve. I think that would have been a better ordering of that sentence.
Yeah, definitely. Because Congreve is definitely a lot more notable for designing his Congreve rockets after his campaign in the Mysore Wars. So yeah.
Seems like this is one where if people would get it early, they'd have to real knowledge it, which is fine because I don't know. I remember when this was being played, they said Annie Besant. I'm like, oh crap, that's on my list of stuff to look at. And then somewhere I remember reading about the Matchstick Girls. I don't remember where. And then they said White Chemical. I'm like, oh okay. But I mean, it seems interesting. It seems like it's important stuff. People are actually getting it. That's one thing, though. It doesn't seem like a lot of people were getting it early. So maybe this is worthy of a trim, but I don't know.
Yeah, I think this is one of those toss-ups.
History matches.
Yeah, I can't really. Speaking as a history player, this is not a topic I know a whole lot about, but I definitely can tell it's one of those things that I don't know. I'm not articulating this very well, but Seth Teitler at one point talked about an atypical power distribution toss-up, where you have sort of a lot of toss-ups on standard topics, where it's okay, people who know how Quiz Bowl works, who played the game for a while, will know to study up on these things and get good at them, and so the people who are powering and buzzing early are pretty predictable. But this toss-up is not like that at all, to my understanding. And I feel you are seeing a lot of people with early and middle buzzes on this who are quite good. But I think that one telling sign is that Sam Bailey has a very early buzz on this question, and he has a very his knowledge base doesn't always. He's a very, very knowledgeable guy, but his knowledge base doesn't necessarily always align with the Quiz Bowl canon very well, and so I feel that's a tell of who this kind of toss-up rewards, and that's not a critique at all. It's just sort of my thoughts on it. That's the toss-up that people probably aren't prepared for exactly. All right, Dylan, go to town on this.
Yeah, you're going to be disappointed because this is a question that I know very little about. I'm probably either just straight up not buzzing or negging this question up until the clue about the rumba. I don't know. Like, it's very unique. I think that a lot of my problem with jazz at non-nationals difficulties is you just trot out a question on John Coltrane, a question on Duke Ellington, a question on free jazz or whatever for every single tournament. And I think that this is something new, but I think it's probably a little top heavy.
Yeah, probably. No, I can definitely see where that's coming from. It was kind of hard for me to choose clues for this. As I said, I didn't want to this. Also, it was an editor question, and I didn't want to do the same sort of thing again and again. And I did try to put in some things that had come up before deliberately, but I think I probably missed the mark a bit.
Yeah, most of my knowledge of jazz from Cuba is from listening to a decent amount of Arturo Sandoval, but I think that he's been asked about a few times in Quiz Bowl already. So,
on the other hand, it does look like people were able to get some good early buzzes on this question, and there were a lot of negs, which I don't know if those were just people guessing. But
okay, as one of the first negs on this toss-up, I definitely just guessed. It's India.
Sure, yeah, certainly the early toss-ups can sort of clue you into the fact that it's probably a Latin American country in jazz. And so at that point, you probably might just take the risk.
Yeah, it just seems that this curve is still very, very aggressive as far as it's very, very bottom heavy as far as the PDF on the buzzes. And I don't know exactly why, but I feel like some of these clues could be worded differently so that they're gettable, or specifically just expanding upon less things, or doing something just to get the buzzes out of this kind of vacuum that just ends up people not knowing what's going on, except for the fact that it's some Latin American country until the habanero is left at the end and everybody buzzes.
Actually, I remember going back and looking up some of these clues later, and I just looked it up again and I remembered those two negs on charangas. Turns out, there's also charangas in Brazil and Spain, which I believe for what those people who named there said. Or I guess at least Michael Coates from Berkeley B said. I don't know what to make of that, but yeah.
No, that's a good critique. That's a good call out. I would probably just delete that clue and add something easier. All right. So, Jason, you're a biochem major, and Eric, you're a biochem major. So, or were at one point.
This is shit that I just sit back and let ACIL crush. So.
Yeah. I mean, I'm buzzing on a name. I don't really see too much of an issue with this question. This question is kind of a classic example of having to use old packets to completely screw up the order of things, because you do not learn about phase transfer catalysis until very, very late. I learned about it in maybe a junior or senior year, in organic chem class or something. And then something like that. And then to be honest, that's my main complaint. I think once again, you could cut a lot of the middle. I don't think the clue about a volcano plot's really helping anybody that much, more so than the clue about the TL modulus or anything else. I think it would have been better if what is happening right? Oh no, there we go. Okay. I think it would have been better if the heterogeneous was maybe, instead of the second to last line, maybe a couple 2 lines up, and then I don't know, talk about the Arrhenius equation, talk about Lindlar's catalyst, talk about palladium on carbon, talk about sort of the things that people run into in intro chemistry or an intro orgo class, because right now this question is just completely devoid of those things.
Yeah, you have you must have a very advanced intro class. You're talking about like Windmiller's Catalyst in there.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. But I don't know if you're talking about like platinum or palladium, like people are gonna get clued in a little bit better. But right now, this is all like really hardcore, like either like chemical engineering or reaction kinetics. I don't even know what this electrochemical promotion thing is. That's why I didn't buzz on it. But yeah, it's just I'm not. I feel like there's too much lead in and not enough late clues. Oh, let's take a look at this distribution of buzzes. So Silverman gets it like around the L modulus. I get it around the L modulus.
So people are about to phase transfer.
Yeah, and Silverman might be, all we know, buzzing off that lead in and just like waiting a second or something. But
this is like shit he takes classes on, so that wouldn't surprise me. I know that Graham Reed studies physics too, so a lot of people who like actually know this shit are getting early buzzes. But then there's a huge gap between between Kai's buzz and Robert Chu's buzz.
Number 19.
Yep, I think this is also representative about the science, like just how science toss-ups tend to be in college as well. Because it's like now that everybody's taking more specific things, you can just like start asking about dumb, random things. That's just like you either have specifically looked at it or you haven't, instead of maybe something that a lot of people are going to run into, except you're expanding more conceptually. So it's not just like, do you know this random doubly eponymous catalyst or whatever?
All right. So does anyone have comments on this toss-up? On Theravada Buddhism?
So once again, like I'm getting this based on like current events / history rather than religion. Like I'm pretty sure I knew the thing about nuns, but once again, like I would wager like a lot of players like cannot tell the difference between the various branches of Buddhism at that level. I mean, I'm buzzing on Warathu because that's the person who's killing all the Rohingya. So like, I would wager that a lot of people are buzzing on those clues rather than that clue rather than any kind of religion clue.
Yeah. So I can speak briefly to this. So I wrote this sort of to fill a gap. We didn't fill a gap in the distribution, and the whole point was, how is religion relevant to today's world in some ways? And like I think I'd like to think that most of these clues can sort of focus on that, in the sense that, you know, like these things are all still like as I think the question mentions, are still prevented from becoming nuns. And think about Warathu, yeah, maybe people are knowing that more from current events, but you know, it kind of sort of is important in a way that like he very much is a very important Buddhist leader and is also doing all these horrifying things. And then the
I would not be opposed to. Oh, go ahead. Sorry. I would not be opposed to spotting people that it is not Mahayana at the end, just because you're at the giveaway. But I don't know. I think the conversion on this was a little bit lower.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that. Also, like, do you talk about like the whole Bodhisattva versus Arhat thing in here at all? Because I feel like that's one of the main distinguishing things between the two, and it's just not really mentioned at all.
Well, I think that's kind of misleading because the term Arhat is used in Mahayana Buddhism as well, in my understanding.
Okay, that's fair.
It's just used in a different way. Arhat, it's certainly used in Tibetan Buddhism. It's something that's like, in fact, like it's something that Quizball only talks about. They have different. I mean, so like I'm not like an expert on this topic, but Arhats are not exclusive to Theravada Buddhism, and you'd have to like talk very specifically about how the use of them is distinct, and that sort of like went a bit off from where I wanted to go. Although I probably could have done a bit better with this middle clue about Mahinda. And like, because I'm not sure how many people. I think I miscalibrated how many people know about how Theravada Buddhism is the way of the elders, because it's a lot older in terms of the core of its tradition. And I think I misfired on that.
At the very least, I remember Bruce Liu buzzing on that exact clue, so it's one person knows it.
All right, so this last toss-up for the packet, and I think we're just over an hour, so hopefully that was the startup cost, and we can blaze through the next one in under an hour. So anyone want to comment on this one?
I'm pretty sure that documentary is relatively famous. Like, I think somebody buzzed on that, so that's fine. Trying to think if there's
Quizbull loves Idi Amin.
Yeah, Quizbull loves Idi Amin.
Yeah.
I think it's really funny that we've gotten to the point where Jonathan Netanyahu is like the second to last clue on a
that's real life. That's real life, very relevant to Israeli politics.
People definitely know about Netanyahu.
Yeah. I mean, people love the Entebbe raid. Like, you wouldn't believe how many points I used to get on Entebbe raid questions because, like, I know the name of the woman they killed in the hospital, like, after the Entebbe raid. Like, it was just such a popular thing. But, like, I think that the issue is that kind of, once again, that kind of distorts this question a little bit, right? Because you go straight from Entebbe raid to Ugandan dictator when there's, like, definitely some stuff in the middle. Like, he was a goddamn cannibal. Like, why is that not in here? You know, like, especially if you're just coming to Quizbull, like, and you're gonna come away from this like thinking that one of the most famous thing about Idi Amin is that he was in charge of Uganda during the Entebbe raid, and that's certainly not the case, right?
Okay, so I'll speak a bit to that, in that I cross-checked this against high school questions, and what you're talking about is basically right for a high school question, but I think like at the ACF regionals level, like this, in my opinion, is a very basic answer. It's just like, you don't need to spend a whole, it's like in a toss-up on crime and punishment at ACF regionals, you don't need to spend a whole sentence naming all the main characters of crime and punishment before you say it for 10 points. And like in the same, with this, and I think the same conceit applies to this Idi Amin question.
So I think that's sort of the fundamental tension that ACF regionals is running into right now. Like, the fact that you're citing, I think I understand exactly where you're coming from, right? Like, the fact that you're citing old high school questions, and that you're saying that in a high school question on Idi Amin, this makes sense, right? I get where you're coming from, but at the same time, like, ACF regionals is being played by a lot of teams that weren't necessarily super plugged in high school, and it's still, from what I understand, it's still the kind of tournament where we want those people to be able to like sort of square off against each other on like lower level clues. So I think you're totally right. I think given that, like, maybe adding like one clue in the middle of Entebbe and for 10 points would have been better. But like you said, look, like, somebody's buzzing on 7 words in this question, right? Like, because Quizbull loves Idi Amin, but at the same time,
Greg Peterson is.
It's not even just that; he's very talked about in real life. I
mean, you're buzzing on Barbet,
for example. Yeah.
I wonder if that documentary is on Netflix or something.
So the person who made that buzz on John Suff, for example, actually apparently told me that clue's come up before as a lead-in in ACF Fall 2015. So apparently that's where he knew that from. But
there you go.
I guess a couple other folks knew it from encountering it. So there you go.
Yep, that's how it's done.
I was going to say, I think Idi Amin is an answer line where you're going to get a decent curve, just because in addition to being somebody that Quizbull likes to ask about, he's one of those sort of wacky people that people who play Quizbull are just going to naturally be interested in looking up stuff about.
Oh, totally.
And so, yeah.
It's not
so
that
I think
long
that helps.
ago that the last King of Scotland was in the popular contents.
All right. So shall we move on to packet L then?
All right. Going in blind on this one.
I think so are a lot of
Oh,
us.
wait, no, I watched a recording of this one. Never mind.
Okay. And Jason, you wouldn't have played this one because you wrote a good portion of it.
Yeah. I appreciate your Bacardi clue here. That's something.
We played this.
Kenji's Bacardi clue.
Yeah, we played this. We played this in practice. I had a pretty horrific neg. So.
Tell more.
Oh, I mean, any of you who know me, well, yeah, as you've seen in this chat, like, I have these pairs of things that I readily confuse with one another. One of them is one large pair of them is Argentina and Chile. So I buzzed on the La Moneda thing and said Buenos Aires. So yeah. I mean, I don't have many comments on this other than, like, I was definitely buzzing on badly placed real knowledge of what happens when you overthrow Salvador Allende. So that's okay.
Yeah, I really like this toss-up, as I do most of Kenji's geography questions. I actually know that the daiquiri was invented in Cuba, which it was a pretty good lead-in, but I don't know. Maybe, I don't know how the middle clues in this played out as much, but the whole toss-up seems quite good.
Well, we can find out how the middle clues played. Looks like this got some reasonable buzzes throughout. Yeah, there we go.
A lot of people know about Victor Hara.
Seems like no one else knows about that daiquiri, Dylan.
All right, I guess I'm Quizball's best bartending player.
It might also have to do with people might not, like, they know it's invented in Cuba, but not.
Wait, did James Lasker play this question? Because his backup.
He played it with Luke Tierney.
Well, he was beaten to it by Luke Tierney.
Okay, because he, as a backup plan for grad school, he took a bartending class. I guess it didn't pay off.
Nice.
Yeah, all right.
Fair enough. All right, I guess we can move on to the next one. All right, Dylan. I know I play tested this one on you, and you buzzed around you buzzed on the clue about the offstage brass.
Yeah, that is, I think you have since reworded this this toss-up to put the fact that it is his Requiem before the clue about offstage brass bands. I don't know. This seems like a fine toss-up to me as far as gradation goes. I'm sure people who play orchestral music probably have better things to say.
Can I point out one small thing about this? I would not put in just on principle, like, a fill in the title blank thing as a lead-in, because I'm not going to confirm or deny whether I have, like, flashcarded every Jacques Barzoon title, but had I done that, I probably would have beaten John Lawrence this question, and I feel like that's not a great way to go.
I don't know who's flashcarding musicologists in Quiz Bowl.
Well, Barzoon is, like, he's not a musicologist. Like, he's a historian, and he's like,
yeah. He's
so
like, I can speak to my logic behind that, actually. So the reason I put that clue in is, so Jacques Barzoon actually played, to my understanding, an important part in reviving popularity in Berlioz in the mid-20th century. But if, like, I wrote that, I tried to, like, if I spent a whole sentence prattling on about that, and perhaps this could have been applied elsewhere throughout the tournament, I guess, but I felt like I could get it, as much as it reduces a bit to a title matching exercise. I did think, like, you know, people probably wouldn't get a whole lot out of me adding the whole substance of Jacques Barzoon repopularizing it. Although maybe they would have. Who knows?
I mean, if it's true, then if what you said is true, that Barzoon played a large part in, like, reviving popularity, then I guess, like, you could also argue that a proficient music player who knows a lot about Berlioz should also know about, like, Barzoon's, like, impact on Berlioz's legacy.
Well, it's the sort of thing that you know you probably wouldn't necessarily learn by being, like, a person who plays in the orchestra a lot necessarily. But if you have an interest in some other areas of music, you might learn. And, you know, I think there are multiple valid approaches to warlording your music knowledge, and they don't necessarily only have to be, you know, things that people who are, like, down to earth in the orchestra are learning about. But, you know, it seems like the buzzes here didn't exactly play out the way I would have imagined.
What do people know about the Berlioz Requiem?
All right, I guess we can move on to number 3 here.
I don't know why, but when I read this to myself before we started doing this, I don't know why, and please tell me if this is like really weird, but for some reason this felt super fraudable. Like I don't actually know any of these clues.
I think that's
that's gonna be a problem with all toss-ups on like
Chinese
on Chinese classical works. Like it's yeah, right. It's a translation. It has a lot of chapters. There's people fighting each other. It's like pretty clear where, and they're not using any names, so you know that like you don't want to make it super obvious. So like there's only a handful of things that could be. But that being said, within those constraints, I think this toss-up actually does a really good job. Like the complex editions are interesting. The Sidney Shapiro's translation is like super notable. I guess the only other super notable translation of Water Margin is Pearl Buck's translation, which is the one where
really bad one.
The really bad one, which is where it got the title "All Men Are Brothers." Yeah. Once again, like, and of course, the problem with writing a toss-up on Water Margin is that it's huge, and that there's so many like little stories in it, and like there are some like set clues like that sort of always come up. Mount Liang is one of them. It's just the fact that there's 108 of them. The fact that there's a thing about like stealing birthday presents that like seems to always get a lot of play. So yeah, I think I don't see any problem with this. Let's see. Cyrus Zoe is buzzing super early. Good job, Cyrus. On Sidney Shapiro, I'm guessing. I can't.
He buzzed on the just story on the lead-in.
Oh, solid.
Looks like either Bo Yang from Amherst got it on Sidney Shapiro, or also just read the story.
And so and then yeah,
one of those things is like, I guess, being. I mean, I know Bo Yang is pretty into Chinese culture. So I guess it's like, you know, a bedtime story for him. Yeah, I mean, like to go back to Ryan's point, I assume like this toss-up also kind of reads like putting in that translation clue was also, I think, Aroni did long fiction, right? Yeah, I did. His attempt to avoid the same like fraudable thing about how like you're not using any like names because they're all Chinese, and then you're just like listing a lot of like it's an anthology of stories that sound kind of like weird and I guess Chinese. Yeah, it's just the problem you'll run into if you're tossing this up.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Let's see. Yeah, I imagine a lot of people are buzzing on the orthohydrogen, parahydrogen thing here.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's fine. That's a lot of buzz in the middle. If you know, I guess, nuclear chemistry, like you're gonna know the I thing. Yeah, I mean, I don't see any real problems with this question.
Yeah,
I mean, maybe
does seem pretty. Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
This question does seem pretty like very based in like intro chemistry kind of stuff.
Yeah.
At least
the only thing. Yeah, I agree. The only thing I would do is I would probably just add a line. Maybe just add a line saying it's like the fourth quantum number or like the up arrow, down arrow. It's probably not a huge deal, but overall it's okay. Yeah, the Rashba effect, that's a notable thing. Great, cool. Looks like a good distribution of buzzes too.
Oh, another thought one.
Another quiz bowl topic that it feels like there have been endless questions on.
Yeah, it's also a thing that debate loves a lot too.
Yeah,
I wouldn't go so far to call it a quiz bowl topic because it's very important to the real world and very widely discussed.
Right, but
all the time.
The problem is this question is all about like philosophy and hegemony, whereas like it's more famous in the real world as an IR topic. So yeah, I don't know enough about.
I don't know. The first
I
time
don't know
I
enough
ran
about
into it was
I don't know how
I ran into like the concept. The first time I ran into the concept of hegemony in college was a like mandatory like diversity class. We were talking like wrote about topics in diversity, and I think cultural hegemony did appear there. And then, I mean, I guess it's fair enough to say that like at least some people would consider the idea of like cultural hegemony as like a real world topic for debates, I guess.
That's fair.
Does anybody? I know there were some comments earlier about perhaps some of these things being a bit specific or obscure to people outside of Quiz Bowl. I don't know if that necessarily applies to this one, since it, but if anyone wants to comment on that.
I mean, to me, it's definitely. I feel like it's more applicable than luck, but still at the same time, like to actually connect it with that specific term is kind of, I don't want to say dubious in a sense, where like if you're coming from somebody who doesn't specifically read about hegemony in a cultural sense, somebody's gonna listen to this and be like, okay, somebody is like dominant over another person. And like there are definitely so many terms that somebody could describe that with, to the point where like the only way they're actually going to be able to get anything is just guessing a term and hoping it's hegemony.
Yeah, I mean, I think in general in like Quiz Bowl, I'm not sure like how right this is, but I have like this idea of like the thought categories in Quiz Bowl as like most of the bus distributions will look like this. Because I guess in like people just don't know that much about it. It's like the like average thought players or the above average thought players will maybe know a bunch of titles. I guess that's like just a challenge in general or for tossing of thoughts, and I guess this does a better job of avoiding the same problems as a luck toss-up did, in that even with this like FTP, there's like just like dominance of one group over another. It doesn't give this like it doesn't give rise to the same buzzer race as like luck would, but at the same time it's also like less accessible as a lot of I don't know, a lot of like higher thought besides just like a bunch of like March of titles would be.
So let me take a moment to postulate a thought hypothetically here. So what if this were so I can say for sure, I didn't edit this question, but I can say for sure that this entire question is about Gramsci and hegemony until the giveaway. So like it's also hegemony and socialist strategies, talking about, to my understanding, the application of that concept in socialist strategy, and the war of position and war maneuver, specifically Gramscian terminology. So as organic intellectuals, would this feel how would this feel different as a toss-up on Antonio Gramsci versus a toss-up on hegemony? If anyone wants to speak to that.
Probably even harder to convert at the end. Like, I don't particularly know a way to fix the giveaway, make this giveaway easier to convert, unless you can like change it into a toss-up on Italy, for example. But I think that at ACF regionals, there's just going to be a few toss-ups on that side of the bell curve where they're not going to always be extremely easy to convert at the end.
Yeah, I think that's I just say like the main thing about this toss-up is just it's going to be one of those toss-ups on the side of the bell curve. But I think in terms of why so many people were complaining about the difficulty of this tournament was that like every packet had like 6 or 7 toss-ups on that side of the bell curve, and at that point bell curve has shifted. So yeah, that's a good point you raised though. This in a normal tournament, this would just seem like a toss-up that people aren't going to convert as well, and that's just how it is.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, certainly. Like from someone who has played a lot of Quiz Bowl, I feel like this is a shade easier than the sort of most of the harder toss-ups from this set that people complain about.
All right, so number 6, I think, is kind of a bit of a shift from the hegemony toss-up. So I'll let you guys discuss this one to death.
Oh yeah.
You said to death.
But Bruce obliterated this toss-up, I remember.
I'm pretty sure a lot of people got really good buzzes on.
Yeah, the Shepherd thing is a notable story. I wouldn't have pulled it, but it is definitely a notable story.
The manfish oil is also somewhat stuck.
Yeah.
I don't have a lot to say about this toss-up. I like it a lot.
Yeah, Discovery, I know, that's definitely like some story I've just heard before.
Yeah, definitely.
So I guess I like this toss-up. It's a really nice way of like putting more like archaeology, historiography into the set. Archaeology, I guess, into the set without negatively impacting like a conversion, or at least like difficulty in playthrough.
A lot of buzzes on that welding clue.
Oh yeah, no. If anything, like this toss-up, maybe even like maybe a lot of people aren't hearing those later clues, but I don't really see any reason this toss-up needs to be any harder than it is. It seems like it's doing its job.
Yep. Yeah, like past the actually, I think every clue I can point at as like something someone would know if they like knew about like the topic of like the Terracotta Army. Like it's like, oh, what's Terracotta Army? It's like, oh, it's in the tomb of Xiongdi. And
I
there you
just
go.
in general was very impressed about how the sort of historiography archaeology category was done at this tournament without going too crazy or feeling inaccessible.
Thanks for that. I appreciate hearing that. All right. So this Horus toss-up.
So I'm a pretty big offender for this, where I turned some of my poetry toss into just like a march of quotes and like lines.
Did you submit this, Jason?
I did not. Probably it was either another team or it was Roni. But I will say that like this one seems a little like too much. It's like it's like flying through a bunch of different poems, just like quoting these lines, and unless these like lines are like the core line of the poem or they're actually like famous Horace quotes, then I can see the complaints that some people are starting to broach, where like poetry tosses turn into like like just sew together like a blanket of like copy pasted quotes from like Poem Hunter or something.
Do people read a lot of Horace if they're not like studying classics?
Yeah, so you can go ahead and speak, Jason. I have a comment.
I'm not exactly sure because I myself don't know that much about the classics, but I mean, I would guess that Horace is like one of the more there's like if you're gonna think like who's a Roman poet, Horace is gonna be like right up there. So I'm not too sure, but I would guess that Horace is like at least within the classics, like the Roman poets. If you're gonna expect some poets to be like well read, it's probably gonna be like him or like Virgil.
Yeah,
I definitely agree with the comment that this is just like way too many quotes, because like people read poems, they don't necessarily memorize the exact quotes, but they know what the poem is talking about and they understand what's being portrayed. But if you just quote as many Jones as you possibly can in the toss-ups, then it's just listening to a bunch of ramblings until you get something that's actually definitive, which seems to be happening around 60.
If you look at the toss-up, though, I think you did a pretty good job of like contextualizing the quotes too. It's like you don't necessarily have to know the quotes; like they take up 70-80% of the sentence. But like look at the lead-in, it says, "A woman urges her husband to go wherever your feet in the wind." So it's like if you read the poem, you have a clear memory of like what the poem is, like the main thrust of the poem, which apparently is a woman urging her husband to travel a bunch, and then remember her. So I guess it's not like a bad example of like a string Taylor quotes, but it's a lot of quotes.
Yeah, and I would push back against a little bit of that too, just because, for example, the Cleopatra. So like, as Jason says, that quote, he's contextualizing, celebrating Cleopatra's decision, and the specific quote chosen there, "Now is the time for drinking. Nunc est bibend." That is by far the most famous line of that particular poem, celebrating the victory at Actium. So,
that's what like inspired the Michelin Man.
So that could, I mean, one could, I guess, cut one of these couple early sentences and maybe put in something about Maecenas or whatever. Or I don't know enough about Horace to really say what a good later clue would be. But
yeah, see, I think not a lot of people know a lot of things about Horace anyway. So maybe it's good to have like a few more, I guess quiz bully or stocky things like instead of.
Well, I also think there's something to be said for the fact that a lot of the hardcore, like there's not as many classicists in the game as there used to be. Like,
yeah.
I mean, I know you, Eric, you used to play with Dallas Simons. Matt Jackson took a lot of classes on classics. Matt Bollinger was a classics major. I think a lot of this just might be the fact that the player pool is just not salted with as many classicists as it used to be. And perhaps this means some of those questions need to shift, but I suspect that this toss-up would have played out. The buzz curve would have looked quite differently if it were at, say, 2013 ACF regionals.
Yeah, I mean these early sentences, like it seems like they do a pretty good job of like summarizing the poems.
It is sort of like looking back that you can sort of glean the Carpe Diem theme in the poems from just the excerpts given, but I don't know how much that would affect play of the toss-up.
Yeah. It's always a lot harder to parse these things and make it game speed.
All right, number 8. Oh boy!
Oh yeah,
all right.
I play tested this question.
Oh boy! Yeah. Okay. So this was an editor's question. This was by far my favorite auditory arts toss-up to write for this tournament. If anyone wants to comment on this one, it was partly inspired by the fact that Jason submitted a bonus on Kanye West that talks about his line, "Have you ever had sex with a pharaoh?" And so I'm pretty sure Kenji decided not to let that in, but like, you know what? People didn't submit much of jazz, but you know what we can do?
You unfortunately have foiled my attempts to toss up Pharaoh Sanders at ACO in future years.
Oh no!
But,
I actually put him in as a bonus part in like some submission I had a long time ago, I think. And now he seems like people know who he is.
I really like this toss-up. I have no idea what the buzz curve was like. I assume that there are not a lot of buzzes before the sketches in Spain clue, but I guess.
I don't think there's a sketches in Spain clue.
Oh no, never mind. Sorry, I meant Bitches Brew.
So
right there.
I know Clark Smith. Looks like I know Clark Smith.
Clark is really good at jazz, as I've learned from these buzz points.
Itamar told me that I know a lot of the buzz points didn't get recorded at the Kansas State site, but Itamar told me that Caleb Kendrick second clued this toss-up. Seems like some people are getting some buzzes off Pharaoh Sanders. And I know C made a frustrated neg on this question, but
nobody is apparently buzzing off of this Joe Zawinul clue, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, it's just talking about Pharaoh's dance.
Yeah. I don't have a lot to say about this toss-up other than people need to learn more jazz. I think that it would have played fine at ACF Nationals as well.
Yeah, I think this is one of those edge cases where a toss-up can probably equally work in ACF Nationals and ACF Regionals, possibly. Maybe I wouldn't have dropped the portrait trilogy right there if it were an ACF Nationals question, but that doesn't seem particularly egregious to me. I don't know, it just seems like something that's like not on the radar of many people, and therefore people weren't necessarily prepping for it, and it probably would have done its job equally well at either tournament.
Yeah. No, I feel that.
Stacks.
Like this question is like, I mean, coming from somebody who studies a lot of CS, I guess this is different, but I kind of think that this kind of thing is there isn't as much to a top of it as there should be.
Hey, what to it?
Like more difficult lead-ins, because like the shadow stack is a very, very well-known thing.
Yeah. Oh,
I think
yeah.
so. I think you're you have some insider knowledge of this.
Yeah.
So you should be buzzing on shadow stack, because if it is a well-known thing, then and you're a CS major, like it's totally fine for you to buzz on it.
Mm-hmm.
For counterpoint, I'm pretty
sure.
Yeah,
that's definitely sure. What?
Yeah. As a counterpoint, one of my teammates is also a CS major, and she buzzed on, I think she buzzed on guard, and if I were listening to this question, I would be buzzing on canaries, because that's a clue that's come up before.
Yeah, that's also where I'm buzzing. I did a lab in a programming class that was basically like trying to prevent buffer overflow attacks. So I learned about canary values, but I don't know anything about the early clues. I'm sure they're important.
Yeah,
I
and
mean, it's,
of course, if I'm gonna get it on my soapbox for just like 10 seconds, this is a classic example of the fact that like if you put 5 quiz bowl computer scientists in a room, they will have 5 different interpretations of how a question should be written. So
that's probably very true because like yeah, there definitely isn't a very specific thing that everybody does. Like there sort of is, but like yeah, that's definitely a true statement.
yeah, but I don't. I mean, if the buzz points on this question look good, it's probably fine. I'll just point out that I've heard of canaries. I've heard of like return to libc, and I've never heard of the stuff in the middle. But I don't know if the stuff in the middle is like famous to people who actually know CS. So
stack smashing is a fairly famous like
yes,
smashing stacks.
computer security.
Ophir, do hyphenated words count as one word in your word count or 2 words?
What were we gonna answer that?
Yeah, the other thing is
He says it counts as 1.
Okay, so
nobody is apparently buzzing before the clue about canaries.
Yeah, I was told that because my teammate Jonathan submitted this one, and he's very into security for CS, and I don't know, he seemed to insist that the Shadow Stacks lead-in was something that's been discussed a lot in like security academia.
But apparently nobody buzzed. So that's like, I guess that's a sort of thing. I mean, I never played this packet or looked at it before this, so like.
yeah, but that means it's a perfect clue because people with deep knowledge are buzzing on this thing, and a lot of people with less deep knowledge are getting a nice slope of buzzes. Like this is
This is a very nice toss-up. This is another thing where like it feels like I have played a lot of computer systems questions on the stack, but like through the eyes of a computer security perspective, I think that it's a nice way to put a fresh spin on an accessible topic at regionals.
Yeah.
Ophir points out that it's like a very small sample size for this packet.
Yeah. Although that should apply for all the toss-ups in this packet. So yeah. So I guess this packet's doing pretty well. I mean, so far I don't think we've hit too many like clunkers or too hard things.
Yeah, no, this packet was pretty short on spicy meatballs.
You change.
And the spicy meatballs seem to have gone pretty well.
Man,
do you change?
This is a really creative question.
Oh,
Jason actually can take credit for. I barely edited this toss-up. I think I clarified the who talking about Kent State, and I tried to make it. Jason, you could speak more to your choice of this answer line, but I decided to keep it for experimental rather than just making it a toss-up on the Vietnam War, where you could have just guessed like, oh man, what's this war that everybody's protesting in the middle 20th century? I decided to go with this and see how it would play out. I know there were some mixed reactions, but I want to get this chat's feel for it.
I mean, speaking from like personally, like there's a lot of times like when I come up with toss-ups, I find something I'd be like, hey, that'll be a really cool lead-in. I think I can think of a single like answer line where this would actually be an acceptable like lead-in, and that's how I came up with this, I guess. And then I remember being a little worried that like this might actually be like too out there in terms of answer lines, like protest the Vietnam War. Like it might. Like, is there a way to point directly at that answer line? And I just really liked the story though, Kiyoshi Kuromio, but I don't know. Like that's really my main concern with this was whether or not like an answer line of protest the Vietnam War, could any of these clue like can I like write a clue that points the player into like that guides them into saying that without like drawing out negs or drawing out confusion. And at some point I think I wrote out this like long answer line instruction and I said, all right, we'll take care of the rest.
If I remember the recording of this game from the Illinois site correctly, I believe that Luke Tierney rode the prompt train pretty far on his early buzz and just could not get to the final answer. So there's another data point in favor of these middle clues being evocative of knowledge, at least some knowledge.
So, sorry, somebody else going? Okay, so I remember seeing this one in the forum thread that somebody pointed it out, and when I read this packet to myself a couple hours ago, I didn't recognize it until I got to Jeffrey Miller, because I'm like, oh yeah, that's the guy from the Kent State picture.
the thing that I think that throws me off a little bit, and it may have thrown off some other people, is this kind of political action. Like, to me, that implies like self-immolation or sit-ins, like a form of protest as opposed to protesting a specific thing. I don't know. I could be totally off base with that, but that's just something that me a little bit in terms of the wording.
Yeah, I believe that Luke's initial answer was student protests. So.
I see.
Yeah, I tried to give specific instructions, and it's kind of unfortunate that again didn't get there with that. It's like instead of just putting a generic prompt, I think it'd probably be helpful to say, well, protesting what?
I think, definitely there was just in general just a bunch of pronouns, like just I don't know. There's a lot of pronouns that weren't necessarily good for this. I remember a toss-up that was on the U.S.-Mexico border that referred to it as an area, or like even maybe even a region at one point. But like definitely better pronouns are something that this needs, in my opinion.
Okay, I'm gonna get on my soapbox a bit, like Eric, and say people need to stop using the word pronoun incorrectly in quiz poll. We're looking for is identifier. This kind of plural is an identifier. It is not a pronoun. It's not standing pronoun. So can we please start, just as a meta announcement to everybody, can we please start using the correct terminology for that? Because that's not what the word pronoun means. Not to you specifically, Sebastian, but I know this is a general bad practice in this game that we need to fix.
No, yeah,
What word would you prefer?
Good identifier, but yeah.
Yeah, I just say identifier. But other folks. Ophir is saying it doesn't truly matter. He knows a lot more about linguistics than I do. But all right, so yeah, this toss-up. Jason can say where this originated. He then can probably describe whatever I did to it. I'm not sure how much I butchered it, but.
Oh, I love this question. So
I saw
Jason, you go first.
I saw the word Evangelion and then became very disappointed.
Oh, that was funny because I'm sorry. We read this question in practice, and then I immediately both Paul and I looked up whether Evangelion had 22 episodes.
Nah.
Yeah, but anyway, go ahead, Jason. Sorry.
I know that the light verse was tossed up at CO a few years back, but other than that, I have no idea what the curve was on this toss-up.
Yeah.
Actually, it wasn't.
Yeah.
I didn't write this. I didn't actually submit this toss. It was my teammate PC. And I remember he was looking at something he's asking me what he should toss up for religion. And he came up with, I think, something about the light verse in the Quran, and I said change it to I started suggesting those Kabbalic clues for him turning to toss up on light. So I mean, I'd love to take credit for this, but it's not me. But I did think what he came up with when he submitted it was actually it looks really cool.
I imagine lots of people are buzzing on the clue about the transfiguration.
Yeah. So here's the thing about light toss-ups. There's a lot of different ways to write them, and they usually turn out okay. I'm glad that you used this thing, because in the past, I think I managed to throw Matt Bollinger for a loop in the ICT final I was in, because there was a toss-up on light where he was it was this, they said this substance or something kind of not quite right, and he was what is this substance that's present at the transfiguration? And I think thing is certainly a better referent for that. I think it has a good pyramid. The Surat al-Nur is a notable thing, and you both talk about what it talks about and the fact that the Sufis love it, which is great. The fact that in Islam angels are made of light is also a notable thing. Humans are made of clay, jinns are made of fire, and angels are made of light. That's a thing that's very commonly taught. The transfiguration is buzzable. Yeah, and the inner light is where everybody's buzzing, and there's a good giveaway. So seems like it's a pretty suitable question. Looks like not a lot of buzzes early. I would say that if we were playing, we would have contributed another early buzz to this for sure. I don't think I would have beaten Samir to this, but I definitely would have gotten something like a pretty good buzz on this question. Yeah. So maybe, I mean, I'm trying to think
Small
of if
sample size.
yeah, I think that there's an issue with small sample size here. I'm trying to think if there's any other anything you do. I feel like my only real complaint about this is that there's a lot more about light in Kabbalah than just what the lead-in has, and there might have been more you could do with that.
It's not Kabbalah. That's Manichaeism, and there was a Kabbalah toss-up elsewhere in the tournament.
Fair enough. Maybe.
Because,
Okay.
Oh yeah,
original submission-
Manichaeism famously has a world of light. That's true.
Yeah,
That's
Famously
I think
dualistic,
that's
so
one
that
thing
makes sense. Like,
Yeah. Because the original
I
submission,
think-
remember, I suggested to PC was is like, you could do like a light common link on Kabbalah and Manichaeism, and then he came up with a Sufi's clue, I think, and then
well, there was also like some irrelevant Hinduism clue, and they're like, oh, cut that. Let's make this all Abrahamic and
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that you guys pretty much basically described my conceit in editing this. So, but yeah, you can see why I had to cut I guess I sort of divulged that. I'm sorry if I spoiled the tournament for anybody reading this, but it is on the archive, so it's fair game. But there is a Kabbalah toss-up elsewhere in the tournament, so I had to get rid of those Kabbalah clues.
Oh yeah, at this point, too bad.
All right.
There's now. I think this one also was like a pretty good example of stuff you do learn, and like the early clues were things you do learn in early classes, or at least.
oh hey,
Oh,
I
no,
think
that's what I
I
learned.
care about. I was looking
Yeah,
away.
like melodic
Oh.
esters.
Yeah,
I
Ben
know,
coaching
I learned
buzzer
that.
raised me on this on melodic esters, which is probably what should happen.
Well, Chris Ray is also buzzing on that clue.
Oh god.
And I don't know anything about this topic, but I'm also buzzing on that clue because I've heard the phrase melodic ester before. So a lot of
All
people
right,
were
well.
complaining about that being there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think I've written a toss on the melodic ester synthesis before, so like we'll see if I feel, I mean, most of my complaints about this question are kind of what's the word? They're kind of esoteric. Like I don't think the proton NMR clue is super useful.
It's not.
That shift region has a lot of shit in it. And it's not telling me anything I can use. Homologate. I've definitely seen like alkyne homologation use dibromomethane, which is another kind of annoying thing that happened there. Let's see, where are people buzzing? All right, Silverman, where'd you get this?
Silverman's buzzing before melodic, so that's a good sign.
Yeah.
He got the NMR shift stuff, I guess.
Oh, geez, really? Wow.
I guess that means it was useful for
Norman
him.
does NMR in his lab all the time. I'm pretty sure. So
that might explain it.
Really unsurprising.
That's like you need a pretty organized knowledge of that to be able to buzz there, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I usually that's weird. I didn't realize that esters were just notable for having the shift there. Like I thought there's a lot of things that's shifted there. Yeah, I mean, this is where's everybody? So 49, I'm guessing, is the word melodic, which is where everybody is buzzing.
Yeah, there's 5 buzzes there.
Yeah, it's like
Okay.
Yeah, compound of this type.
Yeah, I mean, if I were, sorry, if I were writing this question, I'd put some more.
Yeah, I don't even
sorry.
know. Sorry.
I was saying that Ophir points out that it seems to have a relatively ideal distribution, which I guess I'd agree besides the single melodic thing. But I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know what you do about that because melodic ester synthesis is a pretty important core thing you come across in classes and stuff.
Oh, totally. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the thing I'd change, I'd probably put an actual reaction in here somewhere, like early-ish, but that's a personal style thing. So, yeah.
So yeah, this toss-up. Before we get into it, I can speak about the genesis. This was an editor question that actually Aroni wrote this one. Most of miscellaneous that was Wilhelm Mormon, but Aroni did write this one to replace a different question that I think Jason submitted.
I like this question a lot. I don't know if it played well at all, but this might be another one that like would have been fine at ACF Nationals as well. But yeah.
Yeah, that's what I suspected when I saw this question for the first time too, which is that like it's a really cool answer line. But you could probably just take this, add one more clue to the top, and put in ACF nationals, yeah. And
Or
I don't
just
know.
cut the first clue and just make it 7 lines, and it might do
Yeah.
that as well.
I don't know though, because like these clues, it's like it seems like it's kind of an either you know it or you're counting clues until you can guess what the answer would be. But I like Dylan, I share like some doubts as to how well this toss-up played. Yeah, let's see the stats. So a lot of buzzes
Couple early
on history and tragedies.
Yeah, it looks like people weren't necessarily prepared for this one very well. I would contest the. I would contest the one thing in that, you know, foul papers. That's a pretty evocative, like English Renaissance era kind of thing. Just like, you know, bad folios and things of that. So I think like
Yeah.
if you've seen a lot of those things before, you can be clued into what's going on. You won't necessarily like be able to buzz on that, but I think that'll give you an advantage over a player who doesn't. And like, you know, but I think something that may seem like a buzzer race will actually turn out to be, in that case, just like, no, you actually had more idea of what was going on, so you won. You were in faster.
Yeah, but it doesn't look like
But it was
really
pretty hard.
race here, yeah.
Yeah, looks like it was ended up being hard.
If you were buzzer racing at comedy histories or tragedies, I don't think foul papers helped you that much. It was 2 sentences earlier. But yeah, this is it's a cool idea for toss-up. I think it was like the same. It was like the running theme in this year's ACF regionals was just lots of cool answer lines, but not a lot of playable clues in them.
Oh, hey, I play tested this question.
Oh, I really like this question.
Yeah.
It's a good question.
I like it. I will point out that this is doing that thing that a lot of Norse myth toss-ups do, where everybody knows everything about Norse myth, so you are like compressing more and more obscure sources into the lead-in, which is all right, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, so this was originally a toss-up on Fenrir, and
Okay.
I had to get rid of that. Well, I was asked to get rid of that because it was like, well, I mean, there's only like, you know, 7 clues. Like there are like, you know, maybe 10 clues for Fenrir out there.
Were the clues for Fenrir?
Exactly,
Yeah.
and it was like, well, that's not the direction we wanted to go with this tournament. So I wrote this, and even then, like a lot of these have come up before. But you know, this lead-in, like if you know who Scaevola is, so Scaevola is an early Roman hero who loses his hand in a fire.
God damn it!
Oh,
That
yeah,
would have been
that
useful to
guy.
know.
Yeah,
Like, so-
I know who that guy is. I just didn't know his name.
Yeah, so Scaevola basically when he Gaius Mucius Scaevola. So when he I
Oh
believe
yeah, this
when
guy.
he was talking with an Etruscan king.
Yeah, it's
So-
like that story about Lars Porsena, right?
Yeah, he's talking about maybe I can't remember. I don't know if Lars Porsena is an Etruscan king or not, but
Yeah. Well, Clusian.
Clusian, yeah. So
Yeah.
he basically, when he's captured, he like puts his hand into a fire in order to demonstrate his loyalty to Rome. So like what Dumaziel's talking about there is like, okay, so this is a common mytheme in Indo-European stuff where you have a jurist god archetype. I didn't want to say jurist god in the first line. He's like, oh well, if you know anything about, if you could figure out, oh, this is a Norse jurist god, you have like three answers right there. But like if you know the idea of like Fetialis is counsel, Tyr is a god of counsel, and like Scaevola is a guy who loses his arm. So it's like, so if you know Scaevola is a guy who loses his arm and can figure out, oh, you realize this is a Norse god, well, you know, you can sort of buzz there. But and I know Itamar, you had something to comment around that. Do you want to speak to that? I guess Itamar might be AFK.
Either these are AFK or is having mic issues because I don't think that I've heard a word from him.
Okay, fair enough. But I know, Dylan, you were able to buzz on the tier thing clue.
Yeah, that's just like a classic of being around a lot of quizable questions on Norse mythology.
Yep.
Also, I believe it is a weapon in a non-zero amount of JRPGs.
Yep.
That's real knowledge, man. I did. Somebody did bring up a comment about this later clue I used. The scholars such as David Leeming generally agree, and like I understand that can sound like a bunch of blah 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 to a bunch of teams. But if I just cut that to this god's role was mostly usurped by Odin, like I'm sure you can find a source somewhere that says, oh well, Odin usurped some other god's roles and some other things as well. So like I had to put in like some degree of specificity there just to cover my ass a bit as an editor, but also to like generally like most of the time when you're talking about Odin usurping people's roles, like Tyr is from it's usually talking about Tyr.
Right, but I think the issue with that clue is that unless you know who David Leeming is and you know that one passage of David Leeming, that clue is not useful to you. Like Odin, as you said, Odin usurping people's roles is like a notable thing that Odin does to a lot of people, right?
So it's by far most notable for Tyr, though.
Right, but
like
I'm saying
far.
so this is like me saying that like I don't know, like this disease is associated with the deficiency of whatever vitamin, and like maybe there's like 5 different possible answers, but if I find like one paper on PubMed that says like, you know, this like according to this person, this disease is associated with this thing, like I've correctly like gotten myself out of all future protests, but I'm not like helping the player at all. Like, do you see what I'm saying? Like it's not not like a super helpful thing to pin down.
I do see what you're saying. Dylan, go ahead. Sorry.
I think that you're late enough in the toss-up that you could have gotten away with sort of like splicing that clue in with like an easier clue about Tyr and still being able to keep in like the important gist of that sentence without creating a somewhat unbuzzable clue.
Yeah, that's a very good point, and I think that that context might have just thrown people off to the extent of, well, I think it's Tyr, but I don't know what this guy had to say about it, so which is a very good point you raised there. All right, let's move on to number 15 here.
This toss-up seems hard.
This isn't something I know a lot about, so I can't really comment.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this toss-up starts saying Greek words in the second sentence, but yeah. I don't know how many people are like able to do that. I know the original, yeah.
Like I would have recognized the clue about the massacre at Chios, but I don't know if I would have been able to like get myself to the answer from there. But apparently a lot of people buzzed around there, so good for them.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of people are able to get good middle buzzes around the clues about Kolias, Armatoloi, etc. All right.
Tell us anything about the does it tell you anything about like the early clues then? Like, do you think they're still necessary in a toss-up? Because I know that's what
you could have cut one or two of the first sentences. I personally would have cut the second one because that's just me, because I know Frango, Castello, like to me that word beeps Greek, but a different editor might have cut the first clue instead, and I think either is equally valid depending on what you think people know.
Thank you, Sebastian.
Thank you. All right, so CS Purse. This is another one of those things that are probably tougher for a lay audience if you guys want to lay into it.
Yeah, like the thing about Tychism is like a notable thing that comes up in Purse questions. The fact that he wrote a bunch of essays in the Monist is like also a thing that comes up in Purse questions. Like once again, I feel like this might have been a little bit better had you said he presaged William James as like the first American pragmatist, because at the very least then people aren't going to screw it up at the end with William James.
I would be fine with that.
Yeah, I mean the thing is like this is once again like sort of the tension with ACF regionals is that if this is like a question sort of directed at like the top 25% of teams in the country, like writing a TOS 1 CS Purse is perfectly reasonable, right? Like even the top teams are probably getting this early, right? Like we've seen questions on Purse, we know what to read about. but yeah, this is going to go dead in a lot of rooms, especially with like not as good teams. And if we're okay with that, then we're okay with that. If we're not, we're not. Right?
It seems sort of wild that we're at the point where the fixation of belief is a post-FTP clue at ACF regionals.
Yeah, that too.
Well, I mean, those two are. I don't know too much about. Like, I wouldn't call myself a purse expert, but at least from whenever I read any article, when I try to like learn a bit more about philosophy, and those two were sort of discussed as like, okay, these are the two most important. I guess Quizwell gets this right, and these are the two most important CS purse papers. And the rest of his, like, I guess this is, I don't know if this is completely correct, but I guess this, a lot of his ideas weren't necessarily articulated in those papers as much as to like a lot of articles he would write for science. I think it was Scientific Weekly or something, or ideas that he just formulated independently. And so, I mean, this is just me going off the top of my head, but you know, I think insofar, I mean, if you were to drop the titles, like, I don't know if there's one particular order or another.
All right. Are we moving on? I know that Ophir.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely, that's fine. Yeah, here's another Quiz Bowl classic, I feel.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like a pretty, very
like
classic toss-up. It's
Yeah,
a
this
very
seems like
standard.
a standard fare billiards at half-past 9 toss-up.
Jerry's
Like,
favorite book.
Need a toss-up I can brew at regs. Toss-up boys at 9:30, and this is like what comes out of it. I don't think there's much to say about that in this.
Yeah, it's a key staple of post-war German literature. It's objectively important. I don't know how many folks hear about it. Probably a bit less famous than Günter Grass, but like,
I think it's
certainly a reasonable toss-up.
Yeah, and like Nobel Prize winners is like his like, I guess it's like his thing that like everyone points to, where it's like what's one thing you need to read for Heinrich Boll?
It is definitely his most famous novel.
Yeah.
I think perhaps if you're a new Quiz Bowler unfamiliar to the canon, then that toss-up seems impossible, but it's definitely one of those things that like you can pick up right away and turn into a decent amount of points.
Yeah, and then
and it's one of those things that it's worthwhile for the canon to teach you, I guess, as well.
Yeah.
I guess the consensus is that it's a pretty standard toss-up, like decently executed.
All right, number 18 here.
Okay. Somebody else want to go first?
Ryan, lay into it.
Yeah. Okay. So I would have
Inamar
probably
can type in the
first lined
chat.
this.
Inamar can type in the chat. And,
Yeah, if he does, I'll add what he says. I probably would have first lined that because that Hockney clue with, I think that's Hello, Mr. Hockney, or whatever that painting's called, and it's come up before. I also think the clue
specifically in
ordering in this
Jordan's.
toss-up.
It came up in the Jordan's art tournament specifically.
Yeah, it's true. I think the clue ordering isn't the greatest in this question. Like Richard Diebenkorn has come up one time as like a toss-up at 2015 ACF Nats or something.
I believe one of the hardest toss-ups of 2014 Nats.
Yeah, has he actually gone from that to fifth line of a regular difficulty tournament?
Well, I can tell you that was originally the pre-giveaway clue, so this
Wow.
toss-up was substantially improved.
Yeah, Wayne Thibault is pretty hard. I just think, and I don't know, tell me if this is too much. I think this is still like underestimating.
Yeah, Itamar is saying in the chat Diebenkorn is extremely.
Yeah, Itamar's calling me out on this, so I'm probably wrong. But I think this could benefit from some fanning with Hockney clues, because I don't know. I feel like we shouldn't overestimate how much people actually know about Hockney in terms of Quiz Bowl stuff, and there's more to mine with him than just Bigger Splash. But again, I could be completely wrong. This is just observations from looking at this. So the clues aren't bad. I just think maybe make that Matisse one the lead in, bump up Thibault and Diebenkorn, move the Blake clue somewhere down into the middle, because that does link to Hockney, who is more famous than the other two, I think, and then maybe fan out Hockney a little bit. I don't know. Just thoughts.
This seems like a perfectly fine Nats toss-up.
Oh, you could probably just trim the lead in, but yeah, no. Itamar is saying in the chat, yeah, Diebenkorn and Wayne Thibault are both very famous. I've definitely heard maybe I have like a weird on, but I've definitely heard people talk about people from California talk about them.
Oh, yeah.
People who go to contemporary art centers. I'm sure Jason, you can speak to that as well. But
Yeah,
I think this is one of those questions that definitely rewards like engagement with like contemporary art, but also is going to feel very punishing to people who don't do it. Although there's a cherry there for people who know like what the Getty Center looks like, which I think a lot of people would know, and I suspect there'd be a lot. I guess we can see if there are a lot of buzzes, but it looks like there were a lot of buzzes on that clip.
I mean, I'd say like someone didn't play this packet, but I definitely get like, as you said, if you're like a little plugged into contemporary art, TV Corn and people are very famous, especially from California. And I'd say I'd probably buzz right around Debo too. My teammate PC would probably get before me, but as you can see from like the top 3 buzzes on this toss-up, just 3 of my fellow California players. So yeah, I mean, like Demon Corn and Debo are very famous. But I agree this is probably a little too much. Like it's leaning a little too much on that conceit.
And I'm definitely willing to defer to you on those guys being famous because I really don't care that much about contemporary art outside of knowing things about it for Quiz Bowl. So I'll take your word for it that they're important and famous and stuff.
Yeah, it's like it's a large like plurality of like the museums in LA are like, you know, contemporary focused. So that's probably why like when I come across them a lot more than I guess the standard I guess person plugged into art who's like not from California would be. So I'll concede that this is like toss up definitely is a little too it runs with the idea that Demon Corn people were famous a little too much, or actually too much.
Yeah, and I guess there's a brief philosophical point we touch on. I think we can get through the rest in a couple more minutes. But if most of the toss-ups in a tournament are like let's say it's meat and potatoes topics like Whistler's Nocturnes or Peter Paul Rubens or Pablo Picasso. I don't think there was a Picasso toss-up in this set, but Pablo Picasso or a Ghent altarpiece or like very like standard sorts of things that I expect a lot of people to know. How many questions of this sort do you think are appropriate to have?
I mean, like it's like I said, like this seems like a kind of toss-up where it might be maybe a little more than the hegemony toss-up, but it might be like a good toss-up. The classic example you'd see in like the higher end of the bell curve for a regular difficulty tournament. But like I said, at regs, it seemed like many of the toss-ups per round were like those higher end of the difficulty bell curve things. So this might have like been like in a different tournament. This might have played out better, or at least like seemed a lot less dubious. But
I guess what I'm trying to get at is why is it at the higher end of the bell curve difficulty though? Is it because people just haven't encountered this topic in previous questions? Because it seems like the people who are buzzing early are, I guess, either people who, as Itamar posted in the chat, have seen the clues that came up in recent sets, particularly that lead-in, or alternatively people who are like, I guess, presumably Henry and Sam, who we see here with the early buzzes, who actually engage with these artists.
Yeah, so our buzzes are 3 good early buzzes from Californians, 2 people who know what the Getty looks like, and then a bunch of people who know about a bigger splash.
I don't think that's most visited art center. Yeah. Yeah, it looks like there's a buzz on Thibaut as well, and a buzz on Demon Corn.
Okay, yeah, that's true. Sorry, I was
So I would dispute that a little bit. It's not my toss-up, but
like I don't think this is like not fine for ACF rags. I don't know.
I think the reason we're talking about it playing so hard is because these are clues that have come up before, but they're clues that have come up in very hard sets, like ACF Nats and Jordans and stuff like that, that only people who are really, really invested in getting to be strong in visual arts are going to look at. So the majority of the player base is not going to have much of an idea what this is coming from.
That's a good.
Which Anamar just kind of said. Lead-ins from Jordans, the second clues from ACF Nats, third clues from Jordans. So
I guess what
There's
I'm
sort of
driving
a-
at is I think regardless of how it was executed, it ended up copying clues from old hard sets. I don't think that's how I'm not going to speak for Kenji here, but I don't like. It seems pragmatically like this question. Like the people who are buzzing either looked at those or people who actually engaged with the art. And I'm just wondering if like how many of these questions that sort of aim at that are appropriate to have in general, as opposed to things that you could probably learn a bit more about from reading an old ACF regionals tournament. And if in general, like maybe was this tournament too punishing to people who maybe decided to learn mainly from learning old ACF, looking at old ACF regionals, or trying to build up their knowledge a bit deeper from the ACF fall canon, for example.
I think a good way to do that is keep either one of Thebo or Corn to reward the people who do that kind of deep studying, because they're basically both hitting the same audience. So keep one of those clues, remove the other, and replace it with a sort of harder Hockney clue that's still more likely probably that someone's going to look at. I don't know. That's just my thought on how you could make that a little bit less, how you can make it both still good and helpful to people who do that deep studying, while also giving more opportunity for buzzes for people who aren't as plugged into the absolute deepest levels of the canon.
That's a very good point.
That's a good point, yeah. But actually, yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, I think that's a very good happy medium there. All right. This question. All right. You guys can go ahead and comment on this. I know this question was hard. I know I wrote it as to be the hardest world history toss-up in the tournament. I can speak to a bit more to my philosophy about it later, but you guys can go ahead and dissect it. And I do think this could have done with, if I had redone this, I would have cut the lead in and just probably kept the rest of it as is. But you guys go ahead and speak to it.
I don't have a lot to say about this toss-up other than that it feels really hard.
Yeah, I mean, like, I feel like most people aren't gonna, like, none of these clues mean, I mean, I'm not a history player, but, like, none of these clues also mean anything to me until it gets to, like, Arawak, and then from there, just, like, all right, I guess it's time to start thinking of people in like, near Florida, near the Caribbean, I guess Caribs.
I am very curious about what percentage of those negs on the word Arawak were people saying the Taino.
Were there a lot of negs in Arawak?
It looks like there are 4 negs.
And it was
before that.
Yeah. It looks like it was like 3 of the first 5 buzzes on the question were negs, and that. Oh wait, no, never mind. I'm misreading the.
It looks like, yeah, it looks like 2 people nagged on Kalanaga, or however you pronounce that.
Yeah, and 1 person correctly buzzed there.
Yeah, sorry, I misread a -1 as a 4.
Yeah, no, this question was hard, and I'm not going to dispute that.
Yeah, this is definitely not my field, so sorry. Wish I could add more, but not really.
Yeah.
This is also very much not my field.
Yes,
this is my field.
There you go.
My God, this question is difficult. I think the thing about them finding a new layer of the cornea is like vaguely it was one of those flash in the pan things that like people outside of Optho cared about briefly, but like
looks like Bang Zang was able to buzz on that.
Yeah, so I guess it's a buzzable thing. I mean, and then when you get into layers of the thing, I'm buzzing there. And chlamydia gets in your eye sometimes. That's true. So like, I mean, it's fine. Like I don't the lead in is like super not useful, and I do actually know things about like corneal disease and like have spent some time having to deal with that stuff, but like this is not like whatever this mutation does to the cornea like is super obscure. This might be just a classic example of like picking a lead-in that's just too obscure and not knowing how to pick a good lead-in for this kind of thing. But that's not a huge deal overall because like people are buzzing everywhere else. So
yeah, and a lot of negs too. I wonder if people
Yeah.
are nicking with other things in the eye.
Yep, that's not surprising. I mean, it's a thing. Clearly, people realize it's in the eye, and then it's like, which part of the eye is it? And so you don't know. So.
Yeah, and there's a retroactive correction to make. Jason points out in the chat that according to a scene, that California lead-in was actually not from Verdon's. It was from Stephen Liu's CO Visual Arts tournament, another very high quality but very difficult tournament. All right, I guess that concludes things for now. Does anybody have any comments or takeaways or thoughts on the set or from this session in general and what we could learn? I certainly know as an editor, like I got a lot of good feedback on particular cluing choices, some selection of lead-ins, like on that Morgan Le Fay toss-up, the phrasing of that tier late clue, a few other things along those lines. What about you guys as players?
Yeah, no, I think that an important thing to take away just from like our extreme deconstruction of these questions is how much you and other editors work their butts off to get a set of this sort of quality and freshness.
Well, I don't know about quality, but freshness for sure.
I don't know. I thought this set was pretty good. It definitely, outside of the sort of difficulty things, I'm a big fan of sort of the flavor of this set.
I mean, I was a fan of the flavor of the set. Yeah, just that. Also, I think Ophir mentioned a while back, like he wanted more thoughts on how like this, like what we were talking about here, could be like applied to like creating ACF regionals that was more in line with what an appropriate ACF regional should be. Because it seems like the common consensus was that this might have been the wrong place to do this kind of experimentation. And it's not to say like the editors didn't do a really good job of experimenting well. It's just like I don't know if I think like the flagship tournament of ACF should be the place for again like I keep saying subjecting like a lot of players, a lot of teams to like toss-ups where it's like you're basically playing 3 lines of lead-ins and then you get to start playing a toss-up.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
So the thing I think we're looking at here is just lead-ins and then going off that middle clues. That's what we have to work with here. Make sure that I'm personally, and I know there's multiple schools of thought on this, I think that lead-ins should be buzzable by people as opposed to primarily designed as context. So making sure you have solidly grounded and important lead-ins, which for the most part there were. Some of them were just quite difficult. And then not compounding so many lead-ins that your middle clues start to run out. And again, I'm going to say it, I really like what Eric said with fanning because it sort of puts a better term, like a nice and easy term behind something I've kind of expressed in my own musings about what should this sort of difficulty look like. And so I think the answer lines were relatively good. We didn't talk about bonuses at all, but I think the bonuses were good at giving 10s that were manageable at minimum for teams. And I think the lesson to look at here is just to wrap it up, lead-ins, manage them well, and then make sure that that leaves enough space for good, helpful middle clues.
No, it's like, all right, it's 90.
I think a lot of what we were seeing, maybe there was a compression factor going on, but is that like we were talking about a lot of buzzes coming on those 4th and 5th and 6th lines, and maybe that's a sign that the lead-ins are too hard, but it could also be a sign that, well, the middle clues do seem to be doing their job, distinguishing the people who can buzz on them. Because Andrew Hart wrote a very long post that many of you may not have read, but that's like where the teams will really need to cut their muster if they're trying to move up to the next. Like that's where the top teams are really duking it out, and probably for most newer players, you're getting it. I can't speak too much, but for most newer players, you're getting a chance to buzz in before the late clues. That's probably where they're getting to do it.
Yeah, even up to nationals level, a lot of games, I would say probably above 90% of games between top teams are won and lost on middle clues still, which I think is significantly different from the high school quiz world where buzzes on lead-ins by excellent teams are much more commonplace, and I think that's a very shocking thing to experience for the first time when you're playing a set of this level.
Is it my turn?
Everyone's free for all.
I think we're good.
Yeah. I sort of, one of the things that Ophir Stats has done for me is that when I write questions, particularly about fields that I know a lot about, I sort of have a platonic ideal of how like this thing should go. Like if I write a question on like the liver or something, I usually will lead in with like something I learned in med school, then I might put in something I learned in undergrad, then I might put in something that I learned in earlier undergrad, then I would like make sure it ends with like high school type stuff that is buzzable for something regular difficulty.
Yeah, oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay. No, that's okay.
Okay.
Yeah, it's important, I think, as writers to not necessarily like cling to platonic ideals of questions because they don't often work out. I think especially like as you write more and more, the impulse is to add more and more lead in because you want to get more and more out of question writing, and you want to sort of show that you can find interesting, like fascinating clues. And I think it's really important to do that in the right way, which is why I'm glad I came up with the term fanning, because I think like doing that more is a great way for you to learn more stuff, and it's a great way for questions to become more playable for people who sort of have that middle clue knowledge. And it's completely correct that questions are at every tournaments at most levels are won on middle clues, you know, despite what we try, how we try to play, just because there's just so much out there. Yeah, and I'll also agree with Dylan that I hope this does show that good editors do put a lot of time into making sure that their questions are buzzable. And sometimes, I mean, and I hope I impressed upon people, like when I was commenting on a lot of these science questions, that it's often really hard a priori to know like how much is too much lead in, how much is too little lead in, like what are the clues that people really know, like what kind of knowledge am I rewarding? Like these are things we all have to balance in our minds, and hopefully like Ophir Stats will help us do that more and more. So.
Yeah, I mean, I also have a question for you, Eric.
Yeah.
Or actually, I guess for everyone here. Although I don't know if I know Ophir won't give a closing statement, but we'll try to hurry it. So the point you said about like making sure that it's like a high school like clue in the giveaway. Just make sure like people wasn't converting these toss-ups. I don't know, like, did you think this, like, having read through, like, these two packets, do you think Regionals did a good job of being, like, more sympathetic to, like, the lower end of the players? Like, not the people who are fighting it out over, like, middle clues, but, like, the ones who are probably buzzing at the end?
I think the issue with regionals wasn't necessarily that like the post FTP stuff was unbuzzable. I think the issue is often that like the stuff right before FTP would often jump from a thing that I would consider much more middle to a thing that was very like obvious and very easy. Yeah, I think it's more that I mean there are some topics that you're just not, there's only so much giveaway you can give. Like that toss up on Charles Sanders' purse, like I imagine that's not going to be converted in every room just because not everybody's heard of Charles Sanders' purse, and that's fine. But I think there could have been a little bit more done just in that like middle end section to add a little bit more.
I think there can be like more like like I guess fanning done for like the pre FTP too. Like
I think so. I think that would have helped.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with you there.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that.
I don't know if Ophir's here because I know he wanted a closing statement.
He doesn't have a mic, so.
So I guess this closing statement was just
Well, here's one question. Well, I guess if he said BRB 5 minutes. Oh, okay.
That's right. He was AFK.
What is happening over there?
You missed us rambling a lot. What do you do?
Oh.
Do you want to
We're
give
just
some closing
basically
remarks?
closing up shop here.
Yeah, I have one closing philosophical comment about the role of regionals, but yeah, go ahead. Okay. Sure. So this is a bit more of a question. Sorry to drag this on, but given that regionals is a it is a tournament, it is a flagship ACF tournament for a wide audience, but it's also a qualifier for ACF nationals. And I know that Aroni made a comment here saying in his general announcement post or general discussion post, we wrote many deep questions on fundamental topics. However, we recognize this tournament will be played by many teams that are considering playing ACF nationals for the first time. And this year's ACF Nationals looks like it's going to have the biggest field of any ACF Nationals ever. It's already up to 48 teams, expanded to 48 teams. There's over 100 teams that said they would take their invitation. So it's looking like it may be even possible to expand it further. So it's very true here, what he's saying. Having once been on such an enterprising team and having observed many such teams every year over my decade of involvement in the game, I sympathize with how much of a chasm exists between regular and Nats difficulty. Therefore, I instructed my co-editors to use the first line or two of many toss-ups and the third parts of many bonuses to pointedly draw from, or ask, in the case of bonuses, topics or fields that aren't often represented in the regular difficulty canon. What do you think about the role of nationals, of regionals, and the tension of it between being a step up to the next level and it being a flagship tournament for a very wide audience?
Yeah, so I know that like Aroni also told me like about his experience his first time. Also went to UCSD. His experience the first time he ever went to a nationals where it seemed like he was just like dropped into like like no man's land. It was like a huge. He was taken aback. I guess he was like in shock at the canon shift. I guess like among other things, difficulty shift, canon shift. So all those things, and like these players who seem like they're like swimming through the set, and someone like him who had no idea that people like played at this difficulty like so well, especially like when he was playing basically solo. And then as someone who played the first time at ACF Nationals was next to him actually, and he did as good of a job as he could have trying to get me like acclimatized to that like level of difficulty. But when I went with playing alongside him, it was the same experience. Like I had no idea what was going on, and it felt kind of bad, I guess. So I guess like I can definitely sympathize with his mission there, but I also think like I diverge from his viewpoint in that ACF Regionals is a place to do it mostly because like I said, it's like flagship and so many teams are playing it, and especially this year when like all the reg sets seem to have or the traditionally regular season sets seem to have like started climbing in terms of difficulty or experimentation.
That, or one could suppose that the counterpoint that they're sort of starting to cluster around. I think there was a point to some posts that were made that there's sort of two models of regular difficulty that end up playing out. One being sort of a Terrapin, Dragoon, maybe regionals 2015-ish. I think that set was a bit harder than those, but maybe regionals 2014-ish difficulty. And then there's something more like this, or Penbolt, or maybe some of the harder iterations of Penbolt, or WoW 2. And that this season is just gravitated all towards the latter, while still, I think, having a good number of lower level sets like EFT, SMT, the Florida Spring Tournament, a couple novice, a more robust novice circuit, I think, than there has ever been. So do you think that gap is something that needs to be addressed there?
I don't think the gap necessarily needs to be addressed. I just think there needs to be more. I would be like I said this in Discord at one point. I would be totally fine with it if there were like 3 MUT style tournaments every year and like 2 or 3 Pen Bowl / this year's regional style tournaments every year. Whether the larger question of like what the role of regionals should be, I'm very agnostic on, but I will point out that there isn't necessarily a trade-off between being a tournament that teams could qualify for nationals on, and being a tournament that's accessible. I might say something controversial here, but I think that if you ran like MUT or EMT as the national qualifier, it would work perfectly fine to pick the quote unquote correct teams to qualify for regionals. It might be a little bit like for the top teams or whatever, like it might be a little bit more, the games between like top teams and tier 1.5 teams might be a little bit closer because it's a much faster thing, and like there's like the answer lines will be a little bit easier and so on and so forth. But that's fine. Like it's not like the top teams are going to get bumped off, right? And the middling teams might have more fun with it. Yeah, I just want to point out that trade-off doesn't necessarily exist.
I think that's fair. I think your post get a good point about that. I do think like you said, hard parts you need to start using the hard part a bit more aggressively to discriminate between teams if you do that. And even the middle part, like and I think this even though this year's bonuses were like cited as sometimes having very hard parts, I think that was a lot. If you look through the stats, thankfully let you do this, but I think that was due in more part to a few specific hard parts being very, very difficult. And these were a bit more concentrated in some categories than others. Most embarrassingly, there were no op 30s on any of my opera bonuses, although John Lawrence did say that he apparently heard another team get one, he would have 30'd it, but that's still not a good look on my part. And there were definitely some categories where you had like a third of the bonuses never got 30'd, but some other categories were like not quite that problem. But other bonuses in the categories would be fine, and generally the middle parts were for the most part doing their job. And so I think I think maybe I'm rambling a bit, but I guess what I'm saying is that there's maybe not as much of a problem on the bonuses. They certainly could be more easier, but I think that just means putting a second check on a lot of the hard parts in this set and making sure, like, hey, are we going way too off the wall here? I did see some comments in the chat that there were a lot of middle parts that were perfectly germane and may have even been easier than previous iterations of regionals. But I wonder what you guys think about that.
I mean, I'll say something about the whole, like, what should regionals be sort of aiming as a prep for nationals sort of thing. And my thought on that is not really, because I don't know how to rate the difference in the jump between, let's say fall and regionals and then regionals and nationals. But I think the fall to regionals jump is more important to note just because more teams are going to try to make it. Like, I'm definitely empathetic as like a lower level, like a middle-ish team that maybe if they expand the field might break into nationals. Who knows? Doesn't matter. The teams that are going to make that jump are generally the teams that are pretty committed and are going to sort of know what they have to do to make that jump. Whereas the high school to regular difficulty jump can be a bit more of just a shock generally. And I have empathy for teams that are like this. Like, I remember my freshman year, we went and played MLK and went 0-10. And I felt like total garbage. And now I'm kind of like, okay, I see it, but I feel like the jump. So at risk of rambling, I'm just going to sum it up with what I said. Start first. I think it's more important that regular difficulty be relatively accessible to teams looking to make that jump up to that level, as opposed to sort of priming teams to make the nationals jump, because teams that are going to do that are generally going to have the initiative themselves to know what they have to do anyway. Hope that makes sense.
Yeah. I don't really know how well that any amount of sort of spiced in hardness in ACF regionals can truly prepare somebody for sitting and playing 18 rounds of ACF nationals. In fact, it would be interesting to do a sort of survey with first-time teams from nationals this current year to see, like, if they felt at all that this year's regionals helped them prepare.
Well, that would be interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, survey data in general, I think, could add a lot. I do think we overshot our goal. Speaking personally, I do think we overshot our goals as trying to use to provide some scaffolding with regionals to help teams reach up to the NATS level. to borrow a term from Wittgenstein, or I guess Sextus Empiricus, but and that's caused some confusion before, I know. But
Bullshit. Fuck.
what?
Oh, that's the origin of that story.
No, this is a good example of we shouldn't be too in-jokey. Like, we're putting
Don't be
people
like
off right
me.
now, damn it.
Don't be like me, kids.
Don't be like
No,
me either.
but it's like car talk. Don't be like my brother. But yeah, no, yeah, it's interesting. But I definitely think we overshot our attempts to make it into sort of a scaffolding in terms of, and insofar that we tried to expand the canon, canon expansion at regionals and canon expansion at nationals won't always thrust in the same direction, because let's be real, you can get away with a lot more. We try to get away with some stuff here, but any new teams listening to this, the ACF nationals editors are going to try to get away with a lot more than we ever did. So, although Jordan's a merciful man, but I'll let the rest of you guys speak.
I got nothing more.
Yeah, I don't have much else to say besides just I mentioned before, like most of my collegiate career was spent building, trying to rebuild a SoCal circuit, which was very weak. So I mean, I guess Ryan mentioned earlier that teams who are interested in going to nationals know what they're going to be doing to prepare. And I think teams from these weaker circuits who don't have other members of that circuit who are engaged in the higher levels of Quiz Bowl, they are not going to know what they should be doing to prepare for nationals. I guess Aaron is a bad example of this, of someone who's not connected to the rest of the community. But as I said, he said the first time he was he went to nationals, he felt like a fish out of water. He just dropped in some desert of clues he knows nothing about. He doesn't know what's going on. And I guess there is room for that kind of sympathy that maybe we should be trying to prepare these people more. People who are interested in making the jump to nationals who have no idea what that looks like. Especially in weaker circuits, more isolated circuits.
Yeah, no, I think that's valid. I think ultimately that it's not decided, but I think coalescing around Eric's proposed difficulty for ACF regionals is not unreasonable at all. And the point Ryan makes about teams who are looking at Nats, they know what they're getting themselves into. Or at least I hope they do, for their sake. All right, Ophir, go ahead.
Hello, can you guys hear me? Well,
yes.
I'm just going to try to speak directly, since I can't hear you. I don't have a headset on right now. And I don't have much to say about the difficulty or question content, as I was never, that much of a competitive player. But instead, first, I want to thank Will for setting up this sort of ad hoc discussion, as well as all the panelists who came by, including Sebastian, who is newer to the collegiate circuit. It's refreshing to hear from voices from different levels of experience. I also definitely want to thank all of my brand new supporters on Patreon. I was reluctant to make one of those at first because I think it's sort of silly. But Asim, Kayal, Jacob Myers, Rob Carson, Will Austin, Ryan Rosenberg, and Aroni Gupta all almost immediately signed up to support me in creating Quiz Bowl technology, and I thank them, as well as Joe Su, Victor Prieto, Eric Mukherjee, Kevin Wang, Oliver Clark, Fred Moreland. He also does really good things for high school Quiz Bowl rankings and has a Patreon too, so don't forget to support him as well. Emmett Laurie, Najwa Watson, and Will Nediger. I'm pretty overwhelmed by how many people are supporting me in doing this. So thank all of you guys. One more thing, I didn't prepare too much for this session. the visuals were a little janky, but I hoped it gave people insight into where people buzzed in on these questions. Next time, maybe we can have a different set of panelists. People can bring their own conversion data or whatever they found from the data, because it's all published free for you to use for your research. So in my post, if you go down to the raw data section, over here, you can click on detailed stats, and all the data is available as a TSV. So you can use any program you want to run your own analysis, prepare better visuals than I can for the next session. So that's about all I wanted to say. If you have anything to add to that, what visuals you wanted to see, I'm going to mute myself now so you can talk.
Just want to say, please support Ophir. He does great work. And 3 or 4 years from now, we may enter, because of Ophir's work and probably the work of people who will come after him, we will enter an age where stats will be much more plentiful and much more easily gathered. And also want to give a shout out to Ryan Rosenberg and Tejas as well, who did a lot of really great analyses, especially Ryan's the shiny.io app that he wrote, that there's a link to it somewhere on the Discord, but it's really amazing. It lets you compare buzz points for 2 teams. It's really the kind of it really feels like, of course this is my last year playing, so it's a very opportune time for this to happen, but it really feels like teams can do real analytics now. Yeah. It feels like teams can do real analytics now, and that I think that is going to change the game. And I hope people realize that, people like Ophir and Ryan and Fred and they do these things for with a lot of effort and not a lot of reward. So please consider that when you think about the fact that the amount of money I'm donating to Ophir a month is the cost of one Chipotle bowl or something, and that's really not a lot to ask for revolutionizing a game we all love so much. So just keep that in mind, and at the very least thanking these people is a good thing to do. So.
Thanks for your words and support, Eric. Hopefully, if Dylan, Ryan, Jason, and I go to grad school, we can reap the benefits of what you're trying to help Ophir. So.
Yeah, no, someone's just got to give me money.
Yeah, so I guess last thing I wanted to say is lest it sound so thank you to Ophir and to the editors of this set, lest it sound like I wanted to play roast the editors. I thought this was a very interesting set. It did a lot of good stuff, and I especially want to thank the editors for both acknowledging that maybe this set came in a bit harder and letting us sort of criticize it, as it were, in order to sort of have a really productive, I think, conversation about what regular difficulty is now, what we want it to be, how we can get it there, that sort of thing. So that's pretty much my last statement. So thanks.
Yeah, I just want to thank Ophir for creating this kick-ass stats display that I never thought that I would see in my wildest dreams before it kind of burst onto the scene at the beginning of last year. And thanks to the editors of ACF Regionals for sort of roping me into this after I expressed interest on such a thing in the forums. I had a good time just sitting around with you guys for a couple hours talking about questions. And yeah.
Thank you guys all for your time. And just one last closing remark. If even if this regional set was too hard, I do hope it can serve as an its clues, its approach, its enthusiasm for learning can serve as an inspiration for people to go out and learn more, because that's what I love most about this game. It's what I tried to communicate with my questions, even if it came off in not the best way. And yeah, I think the rest of us did as well. Good night, everyone.
All right. See you later, guys.
Not everyone.
Later, dude.